Chapter 245. Go to watch net. Li Yundong had some doubts in his heart. Why did Zhou Qin suddenly get better? Why did she get better now? Why did she get better now? Moreover, when I gave her qi, I clearly felt that the extravasated blood in her body had been cleared, and the tumor had also dissipated. She should have gotten better yesterday or the day before. Why did she get better today? Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Color * caret and 1 % super #speed. But this thought just flashed through his mind. When Li Yundong saw an old lady who was dozens of years older than him kneeling in front of him, he suddenly panicked. He didn't have time to think about other things and hurriedly went over to help her up. "Grandma, please get up. I can't afford to be bowed to by you." Old Lady Su was short and wore a blue shirt. She looked very thin and wore a pair of cloth shoes. She said stubbornly, "Little magic doctor, if you promise me that you'll take a look at me, I'll get up." Li Yundong smiled bitterly. Okay, I'll help you." Although Zhou Kachang saw that Zhou Qin really stood up, this kind of thing was too incredible. It was almost like a demon. He couldn't believe that Li Yundong had cured Zhou Qin's illness. Moreover, as a senior official in the system, atheism had long taken root in the depths of his mind. How could he believe that there was a doctor in the world who could cure Zhou Qin's illness in 2 or 3 days? If there really was such a person, wouldn't he be like a living immortal? Zhou Kachang looked at Li Yundong suspiciously, wanting to see how this young man would treat the disease. At this time, patients from other wards and some nurses and head nurses who were curious to see what was going to happen all squeezed over, filling the room. All pairs of eyes were staring at Li Yundong. Li Yundong was used to big scenes, so he didn't take these people seriously. He helped old Lady Su up and let her sit on a chair. He helped her check her pulse and then asked about the situation. Although Li Yundong had cured Zhou Qin, it was because the method was correct, so the effect was very fast. But if he really became a magic doctor, even Li Yundong himself didn't believe it. If one could become a doctor just by reading a few medical books and be able to treat all kinds of illnesses, then TCM would have long spread all over the world. How could Western medicine bully them? At first, Li Yundong was inevitably a little nervous, but when he felt old Lady Su's pulse, he used his Jinqi to explore her body and quickly scanned her meridians and internal organs. He immediately knew what was going on. He smiled and said, "Old lady, if I'm right, you often feel very tired, don't you?" Old Lady Su was taken aback. "Yes, how did you know? Do your knees, ankles, and arms suffer from rheumatism whenever it rains?" Li Yundong smiled again. "Do you have rheumatism in your knees, ankles, and arms?" Old Lady Su looked surprised. "Hey, you're really the little miracle-working doctor. I didn't call you wrong. How did you know?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "You probably broke your left arm when you were young, right?" Old Madame Su slapped her thigh hard and said loudly, "Amazing, it's really amazing. How did you know?" As she spoke, she suddenly realized that her words were a little disrespectful. She immediately smiled and said, "Oh, I'm an old woman. Don't take it to heart." Li Yundong chuckled and continued to ask, "In the past few days in the hospital, did you often have diarrhea after eating?" Old Lady Su's mouth was wide open. She stared at Li Yundong, speechless for a moment. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. The people around them also looked at them and whispered to each other. Someone whispered, "This young man seems to have some skills." The people around them also looked at them and whispered to each other. Someone whispered, "This young man seems to have some tricks up his sleeve." Some people with ulterior motives also looked at them and whispered to each other, "Hey, this young man seems to have some skills." Some people with ulterior motives said, "Hey, are you looking for a doctor or a fortune teller?" Li Yundong ignored them and said to Old Lady Su with a smile, "You must find it incredible. Why do I know so much about you? I have inquired about you, haven't I?" Old Lady Su nodded vigorously, like a chicken pecking rice. "Yes, yes, how did you know?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I asked you if you were very tired at first because I found that your 2 kidneys were almost dried up, and you were already very old. The kidneys are the source of a person's strength. If the kidneys are not strong, the person will have no strength and will often be listless and weak. Therefore, I deduced that you must often have no strength and get tired easily. In addition, your knees, ankles, and arms have accumulated dampness over a long period of time. This is the result of not paying attention when you were young, and I found that the dampness on your left arm is especially serious. Dampness usually gathers at the joints of the human body's bones and meridians, or at the wounds. Most of the time, it stays near the joints of the human body, but if a person is injured, it will gather there. Your elbow was broken, so the dampness stayed at the wound. If we don't find a way to get rid of the dampness, it will accumulate more and more. So when it rains, you will definitely suffer from rheumatism and abnormal pain, right?" Li Yundong said with a smile. "That's right. Go to the internet." 7ko/Granny Su exclaimed, clapped her hands hard, and said loudly, "I admire you. I believe that you are the real miracle-working doctor. However, you said that I sometimes have diarrhea after eating for the past few days. How could you tell? When I felt your pulse just now, I found that your spleen is not very good." The spleen was the main butler of the human body. "I was really admitted to the hospital because of high blood pressure." "Amazing, you are so amazing." The people around suddenly burst into an uproar, and they all began to chatter, "Wow, it's really amazing. You know what disease it is with just a glance and a touch." Some people subconsciously felt their own pulse, but no matter how they felt, they could only feel their pulse jumping up and down. They couldn't feel anything at all. They couldn't help but wonder, how did he feel it? Why can't I feel anything? Someone next to him immediately made fun of him and said, "If you could feel it, would you be admitted to this hospital?" Someone sighed and said, "Look at this boy, how can he be so amazing at such a young age?" There were also people who were jealous and said sourly, "After saying so much, he still hasn't said how to treat it. What's the use of just looking but not treating it?" While they were chattering, Li Yundong smiled and spoke again. His voice was not loud, but it was strong and magnetic. No matter how hard they tried, they could not suppress the boy's voice. They could still hear the boy's voice clearly. As soon as Li Yundong opened his mouth, these people quieted down again and listened to him quietly. Li Yundong said, "I just said so much. Old lady, you must want to know what I can do to help you cure it, right?" Seeing Li Yundong's smiling face, Old Lady Su was obviously confident. She couldn't help but be surprised and happy. "Little magic doctor, do you have a way to cure me?" Li Yundong chuckled and said, "Although this kind of disease is an acute disease in the eyes of Western medicine, the treatment method of Western medicine is often to treat the symptoms but not the root cause. However, we Chinese medicine often trace back to the source. As long as your kidney is cured, even if the other diseases in your body can't be completely cured, they will definitely be much better than before." Li Yundong reached out his hand and said, "Excuse me." He pressed it on the old lady's head and said with a smile, "Now I'll show you the effect." As he said this, Li Yundong channeled the purest and most vigorous Yuanyang genuine qi in his body into Old Lady Su's body. Old Lady Su's body was like a hollow tree trunk. Her body was exhausted, and what she lacked the most was yuanqi. However, Li Yundong didn't lack yuanqi at all. He was like a rich man, plucking a strand of his hair and throwing it to Old Lady Su, a poor woman. Although he couldn't make her suddenly rich, at least he could make her no longer poor. Old Lady Su only felt a warm current running down from the top of her head, as if someone had poured a basin of hot water over her head. The hot water flowed down her spine, and when it reached her waist, it suddenly forked and flowed to her two waists. At this time, Old Lady Su felt that her two empty waists suddenly seemed to be filled with hot water, like two hot water bags, warm and rising, as if an exhausted dam had been filled with water again. After a while, the dam slowly opened the sluice and distributed water to all the dry parts of her body according to the needs of her body. This heat rushed to all parts of Old Lady Su's body, and some of the rheumatism that had accumulated in the past was also expelled. Everyone around saw Li Yundong press the top of Old Lady Su's head. After a while, her face became ruddy. After a while, there was a faint white steam rising from the top of Old Lady Su's head. After a while, someone was surprised to find that the wrinkles on Old Lady Su's face seemed to have decreased a lot, and her originally dim yellow eyes also became clear and bright. After about a minute or two, Li Yundong let go of her hand and asked with a smile, "How do you feel?" "I just helped you expel all the moisture from your body." Old Lady Su stood up in disbelief and looked at Li Yundong with her eyes wide open. She clenched her fists in disbelief and found that her strength was much greater than before. She tried to jump and found that her legs and feet were also strong. She shouted in shock, I feel as if I have become 10 years younger." The people around also looked at Old Lady Su with their mouths agape. Even a blind man could see the change in Old Lady Su. Just now, the old lady had been bent over and looked like she was in her 70s or 80s, but now she looked like she was in her 50s or 60s. Even if the people around had opinions about Li Yundong, they couldn't help but be speechless, because the facts spoke louder than words. In their eyes, Li Yundong knew Old Lady Su's condition with just a look and a touch. In less than 2 minutes, he had made Old Lady Su look like she had been rejuvenated and become more than 10 years younger. This kind of method was really no different from that of an immortal. Seeing the change in Old Lady Su, they couldn't help but shout, little magic doctor, please take a look at me." As they spoke, they rushed toward Li Yundong like a tide. /om/45278941954 7 KOM 113 Learn for net. Although Zhou Qin covered her ears, she was still shaken to the point that the qi and blood in her chest were rolling, and she felt very uncomfortable. None of these people had expected that this young boy would be able to roar like a lion. They were stunned and looked at Li Yundong in awe, no longer daring to take the initiative to step forward. Li Yundong suddenly remembered what Zi Yuan had said, medicine carries the Tao, and martial arts defend the Tao. It was not enough to win the support of the world with medical skills. One had to have enough strength to make them fear so that they would be obedient. Thinking of this, Li Yundong couldn't help nodding to himself. It was not enough to be kind and virtuous. One had to have thunderous means to make people awe and not dare to offend him. Otherwise, the world would think that he was weak and easy to bully and come to him one after another. After Li Yunyang calmed everyone down, he coughed dryly and said to the crowd, "Don't get excited, everyone. Take your time. No matter how powerful I am, I don't have 3 heads and 6 arms. It's impossible for me to take care of everything. If you squeeze like this, in the end, I can only run away. None of you will be able to treat the disease, right?" At this time, Old Lady Su stood up and said loudly as the chief supporter, "Yes, the little immortal is right. Everyone, come one by one. I will maintain the order." When everyone saw this, they all laughed. Someone joked, "Old lady, you're missing a red armband on your arm." Old Lady Su smiled and said, "What? Are you looking down on me? My son is from the **** team. If you're not convinced, I'll call him over." The person who spoke quickly waved his hand and said, "I wouldn't dare. Everyone knows that in this world, privacy is the most important thing. Old Lady Sue raised her head and said, "It's good that you know." Seeing this, everyone burst out laughing. Seeing that everyone had finally calmed down, Li Yundong also breathed a sigh of relief. He temporarily acted as a doctor, turning the ward into the lobby and acting as the doctor in charge. Watch net. 7 KOM. The nurses and doctors outside looked at each other with strange expressions. When did the inpatient building become an outpatient department? What kind of scandal was this? But seeing that the people around them were all in high spirits and had excited expressions, they didn't dare to say anything more, for fear of offending the public. If they were beaten up, it would be a big joke. While Li Yundong was acting as a barefoot doctor in the People's Hospital of the city, Su Chan was anxiously waiting for the news of the paper crane in the Taoist temple of the Fox Zen School. It's been a few days. Why hasn't there been any news yet? Su Chan anxiously paced around her room like a headless fly. From time to time, she glanced at the window, as if she was hoping that the paper crane would fly in the next second. She kept pacing back and forth in the room, which annoyed Ao Wushuang. She frowned and said, "Chaner, what's wrong with you? Is your butt on fire?" Su Chan stood still, rolled her eyes, and said tentatively, "Master, I want to." Ao Wushuang immediately said without thinking, "No." Su Chan said with a bitter face, "I haven't said what it is yet." Ao Wushuang sneered and said, "Don't you think I don't know how clever you are? Don't you just want to find Li Yundong?" Su Chan's face suddenly fell. She pouted and looked unhappy. She knew in her heart that Ao Wushuang was right, but she refused to admit it. "You're so annoying." "That's not what I meant." Ao Wushuang glanced at her and said, "Then what do you mean?" Su Chan rolled her eyes and said, I mean, I want to go out for a while." Ao Wushuang snorted coldly and said, "What are you going to do?" Su Chan smiled slyly and said, "I lost the paper crane that Grandmaster Sect Leader gave me. I'm going to look for it." Ao Wushuang snorted and didn't want to talk nonsense with her. She flicked her sleeves and drove Su Chan into the room. Su Chan pushed the door and saw that it was tightly sealed. She stamped her feet and said angrily, "Master, you've gone too far. Let me out." Ao Wushuang closed her eyes and ignored her. Su Chan couldn't help shouting, "I'll climb the window and run away." Ao Wushuang said slowly, "Run away. If you run away, don't come back." Su Chan was exasperated. "I'm really going to run away." As she said this, she moved and disappeared from the room in an instant. Ao Wushuang glanced sideways at the room where Su Chan was and said with a smile, "Naughty disciple, you're fighting with me again. You're addicted to it, aren't you?" Just as she was about to stand up, she suddenly saw Mo Ashi walking over from the door. Ao Wushuang immediately got up and said respectfully, "Eldest Shiji, what's the matter?" Mo Ashi was still dressed in a Taoist robe with a golden hairpin in her hair. Her face was dignified and gentle, but her figure was graceful. She smiled and said, "Yesterday, I found a paper crane in the backyard. I don't know if you lost it here." When Ao Wushuang heard this, she couldn't help but glance at the room where Su Chan was and thought, "Oh, this girl can actually hold back. Didn't she say that she had lost a paper crane? Could it be that she really ran out? This B***starred girl is getting more and more outrageous." Ao Wushuang said with a smile, "Eldest Shiji, you're so polite. You can just send someone else for such a small matter. Why did you come in person?" Mo Ashi said with a smile, "Don't mention it. I haven't seen you for so long. It's good to come and walk around." As she said this, her eyes wandered around the room and she asked casually, "By the way, where's my little niece?" Ao Wushuang sighed and said, "Don't mention her. She quarreled with me, so she probably ran out." Mo Ashi chuckled and said, why did you quarrel with her? Is there something you can't deal with? Ao Wushuang waved her hand and said, every family has its own problems. Don't mention it. Mo Ashi smiled and said, in that case, I won't bother you anymore. Little Shiji, please go ahead. Ao Wushuang smiled and said, eldest Shiji, I won't see you out. As she said this, she watched Mo Ashi walk to the door and suddenly thought of something. She asked, by the way, eldest Shiji, how did you find this paper crane? Doesn't this paper crane belong to Chon'er? How could she have left it in the backyard? Mo Ashi's body suddenly froze at the door. For a moment, her heart was in her throat, and her heart was pounding. Did this be *tch find me? Mo Ashi had always had ulterior motives. Originally, she had just come to test Ao Wushuang and Su Chan. If she saw the two of them together, she would find an opportunity to deal with them both. However, when she saw that Ao Wushuang was alone, she didn't want to make a move. She wanted to find another opportunity. But when she walked to the door, Ao Wushuang's words suddenly made her surprised and doubtful. Mo Ashi's figure at the door looked like a statue that had suddenly frozen, without a trace of vitality. She froze for a while, but soon came to her senses. She turned around and twisted her waist, and her whole person immediately became lively again. She walked toward Ao Wushuang and said with a smile, you'll have to ask your precious disciple. Let's see how she does it. Ao Wushuang smiled and said, then I'll ask her when she comes back. But she has a bad temper and often loses things. It's normal for her to lose this paper crane. Mo Ashi didn't say anything after hearing this. She just stared at Ao Wushuang, as if she wanted to see through what she was thinking. Did she see through it or not? It seems that she didn't see through it. Mo Ashi's face didn't change, but she was quickly calculating in her heart. However, Ao Wushuang had made a great name for herself in the cultivation world over the years. The title of the top master of the Fox Zen school for more than 10 years was not for nothing. Mo Ashi couldn't help thinking, if she lied to me, then wouldn't all my years of planning be in vain? No, I'd rather believe it than not. To deal with this *tch, I have to strike first. Thinking of this, Mo Ashi couldn't help but be shocked by Ao Wushuang's reputation. She secretly made up her mind and showed a smile on her face. By the way, Shimmy, I suddenly remembered that sect leader Shishu mentioned Wang Yuanshan last time. Ao Wushuang only cared about two people in her life. One was Su Chan, and the other was Wang Yuanshan, the leader of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school, who had been entangled with her for a while. As soon as she heard the name Wang Yuanshan, she trembled all over and couldn't help leaning forward slightly. Her Taoist heart was in a mess as she asked, what? What's wrong with him? Seeing that Ao Wushuang's chest was exposed, Mo Ashi immediately pointed one finger at Ao Wushuang's Huagai acupoint and the other at lightning speed at her Shenfeng acupoint. The threaded hairpin of soul traversal on her head also jumped out in an instant and stabbed at the Qihai acupoint in Ao Wushuang's lower abdomen like lightning. In an instant, Mo Ashi changed from a dignified female bodhisattva to a female rakshasa with disheveled hair. Her face was ferocious and murderous, /OM/45278941954. Chapter 247. Go to watch net. Ao Wushuang hadn't expected that Mo Ashi would suddenly make a move. Although her cultivation and spiritual power were the best in the Fox Zen school, and her cultivation was above Mo Ashi's, it was not much higher. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Color, text. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. New. If the two of them were to fight, Ao Wushuang would naturally have a greater chance of winning. But if one side was unprepared and the other suddenly attacked, she would naturally suffer a great loss. Ao Wushuang saw that Mo Ashi had suddenly changed her expression and launched a sneak attack. She subconsciously flicked her sleeves and blocked Mo Ashi's 2 fingers. However, she could defend against these 2 fingers, but she couldn't defend against the threaded hairpin of soul traversal. When the threaded hairpin of soul traversal attacked at close range, it had the effect of instant invisibility. It was extremely sinister. Ao Wushuang was caught off guard, so how could she block it? With a puff, Ao Wushuang felt a pain in her lower abdomen. She looked down and saw that the threaded hairpin of soul traversal was stuck in her lower abdomen. Seeing that Ao Wushuang's lower abdomen had been hit by the threaded hairpin of soul traversal, Mo Ashi couldn't help but sneer and say, as expected of Ao Wushuang. She didn't fall even after being hit by this powerful magical weapon. Amazing! Ao Wushuang was shocked and angry. She stared at Mo Ashi with her eyes wide open and said angrily, "Eldest Shiji, what are you doing?" Mo Ashi was stunned. "You still call me Eldest Shiji? Haven't you noticed?" Ao Wushuang's heart suddenly shook. Noticed what? Mo Ashi's expression was uncertain. She gritted her teeth and said with a sneer, "Nothing. Anyway, what's done can't be undone. Just surrender." As she spoke, she turned her wrist, and a small purple bell suddenly appeared in her hand. When Ao Wushuang saw the purple bell, her expression suddenly changed. She pointed at Mo Ashi and shouted, "This is impossible. You are." Mo Ashi did not allow her to speak. With a shake of her palm, the small bell flew up and became bigger and bigger in the air, covering Ao Wushuang. The Qihai acupoint in Ao Wushuang's lower abdomen had been pierced by the threaded hairpin of soul traversing, and her qi had become a mess. If it were any other cultivator with a slightly weaker qi, their souls would have been separated from their bodies. However, Ao Wushuang was still able to control the qi in her body to fight against the threaded hairpin of soul traversing, which showed how powerful she was. Watch net. 7 KOM. However, Ao Wushuang concentrated all her strength on the threaded hairpin of soul traversing, so she couldn't resist the small bell. Her body was instantly covered by the small bell, and then the small bell instantly shrank and flew back to Mo Ashi's hand. Ao Wushuang's figure disappeared on the spot, as if she had been imprisoned by the small purple bell in the celestial device. Holding the small bell in her hand, Mo Ashi smiled proudly and said, "Ao Wushuang, oh Wushuang, you have such a day? Hey, don't worry, I won't kill you so soon. I want you to see with your own eyes that I kill all the people you are familiar with little by little, so that your Fox Zen school will fall apart." As she said this, she raised her head and laughed. Her voice was not loud, as if she was deliberately suppressing it, but the pride in her voice could not be concealed. After a while, her laughter gradually stopped. With a chuckle, she flipped her wrist and took the purple bell back. Then, she turned around and left. After she left, the room was quiet for a while. It was as if Ao Wushuang had never been there before. The inner and outer rooms were as quiet as a morning hall, and the air seemed to have frozen. After a long time, Mo Ashi's figure suddenly appeared in the outer room. She glanced around with murderous eyes, then flicked her sleeves and slammed open the door of the inner room. Her face was full of suspicion, and she couldn't help looking back and forth in the room. She sneered and said, "Come out, I can smell your breath." She flipped her wrist, and a mass of cyan airflow suddenly appeared in her hand. Mo Ashi sneered and said, "Don't let me use magic to force you out." After she said this, after a while, the room was still quiet, and there was no sound at all. Mo Ashi's face changed. She said harshly, "Then don't blame me for being rude." As she said this, she was about to pinch her fingers together. But at this moment, someone suddenly shouted from outside the door, "Eldest Shiji." The voice belonged to Gu Feng of the Fox Zen School. Mo Ashi quickly clenched her fingers and crushed the cyan airflow in her palm. She glanced at the room with hatred, stamped her feet, and quickly walked out. Not long after she went out, Su Chan's figure slowly appeared in the room. Her face was full of shock and fear. She trembled at the door and stuck her head out for a while. As soon as she poked her head out of the door, she saw Mo Ashi suddenly appear and point at her. She laughed and said, "Even though you are as cunning as a ghost, you still fell for it." As soon as she finished speaking, she pointed her finger at Su Chan's body. Su Chan's figure twisted and then disappeared in an instant. A talisman slowly floated down from the air. Go see net. 7 KOM. Mo Ashi suddenly became furious. She grabbed the talisman and quickly burned it to ashes. She roared in a low voice, "What kind of disciple is taught by the bitch? How dare you play tricks on me? You can't run away." As she said this, she suddenly turned her head and glared at Gu Feng outside the door. "Hurry up and catch her." Gu Feng frowned and asked, "Where can I catch her?" Mo Ashi said angrily, "You chase her in the east, and I'll chase her in the west. I don't believe that she can fly to the sky." After that, she instantly turned into a cyan light and flew out. Gu Feng stared at her back for a while with flickering eyes, then also turned into a cyan light and flew out. After the two of them had left for a long time, Su Chan's figure slowly appeared in the room. She was trembling all over, and her teeth were chattering. She thought in shock and fear, "What should I do? Master has been taken away by this evil person. What should I do?" She thought in panic for a while in the room before she slowly recovered from her fear. Su Chan took a deep breath and turned her body invisible again. She held her breath and hid in the inner room, not moving at all. During this period, Mo Ashi and Gu Feng came to check a few more times, but they didn't find anything unusual several times, so they gave up and didn't come again. When it was late at night, Su Chan slowly walked out of the Taoist temple under the cover of the night. She didn't dare to fly, for fear that if she flew, her breath would be exposed and attract Mo Ashi, the big devil. Along the way, Su Chan stumbled in the deep mountain. When she reached the foot of the mountain, she looked back and saw that the Taoist temple had been hidden in the deep mountain night. She could no longer see any shadow. Su Chan's heart relaxed a little and she took a breath. As soon as she relaxed, Su Chan couldn't help but feel sad. She sat down on a rock in the mountain and sobbed in a low voice, "Master, it's all my fault. If I hadn't shown up earlier because I was afraid, you wouldn't have been caught. Master, I was so scared when I saw Aunt Mo Ashi just now. I was so afraid that I would be sucked dry by her." She cried in a low voice for a while. For a moment, she felt that she was in the wilderness and didn't know where to go. She thought for a moment, crying and thinking, "Now that Master has been caught, I can't go back. Otherwise, I will definitely die. But where can I go now?" Thinking of this, Su Chan's heart suddenly moved. She jumped up and shouted in a low voice with excitement and ecstasy, "By the way, I'll go find Yundong. He must have a way to help me save Master." But before she could get excited for long, she suddenly thought, "But is Yundong a match for Mo Ashi? It seems that she has a few very powerful magical weapons in her hands. Moreover, I don't know if Yundong has passed the heavenly tribulation. If I rush to his side recklessly and delay his cultivation, what should I do if he can't pass the heavenly tribulation? What if Mo Ashi followed behind me and chased after me all the way?" Although Su Chan was usually careless, she was definitely not a fool. In the past, when she was with Li Yundong, she seemed to be stupid and often made mistakes, but that was because she had absolute trust in Li Yundong and didn't like to use her brain. But when she was alone and had no one to rely on, her wit and intelligence showed itself. Su Chan thought for a moment and gradually made up her mind. Finally, she looked back at the location of the Fox Zen School and then in the direction of Tiannan City. Then, she turned around and disappeared into the night. Just as Su Chan was escaping, two blue lights flashed in the air. Mo Ashi and Gu Feng appeared in Mo Ashi's room at the same time. Mo Ashi said with a livid face, "Didn't you find the whereabouts of that little B***tch? Gu Feng shook his head. "No." Mo Ashi gritted her teeth and said, "Why are you so useless?" Gu Feng glanced at her and sneered. "Don't try to command me. I'm from the Wanxiang sect, and I'm not bound by your control. Besides, you didn't catch her either, did you? What right do you have to criticize me?" Mo Ashi was furious. Her dignified and beautiful face suddenly became ferocious. She glared at Gu Feng fiercely and said, "What did you say?" Gu Feng was frightened by her appearance and took a step back. He said warily, "What do you want to do? Do you want to fight here? Well, come on, let the leader of the Fox Zen School see how his disciples fight among themselves." Mo Ashi's expression became serious. She took a deep breath, suppressed the anger in her heart, and said coldly, "I won't settle accounts with you for today's matter, but you should inform the 6 great sects as soon as possible. Tell them that the siege of the Fox Zen School will be brought forward." Gu Feng couldn't help but shout in a low voice, "Do you think you are the leader of the cultivation world? If you say it will be delayed, then it will be delayed. If you say it will be brought forward, then it will be brought forward? Don't you think too highly of yourself?" Mo Ashi flew into a rage. She suddenly stretched out her hand and grabbed Gu Feng in the air. She said fiercely, "Without me, the 6 great sects wouldn't even be able to find the Fox Zen School. How can we besiege it? Now Ao Wushuang has been sealed by me, and I don't know where her disciple is. If we don't besiege the Fox Zen School immediately, it won't take long for Lu Yi, that old fox, to realize it. Once he realizes it, he will find that the strength of the Fox Zen School has been greatly damaged, and a strong enemy has come to attack us. Humph, you can forget about finding the whereabouts of the Fox Zen School for the rest of your lives." Gu Feng was choked by her. He struggled and said reluctantly, You put me down. Even if you strangle me to death, you won't get any benefits. Ao Wushuang has disappeared. If I also disappear, how will you explain it to Lu Yi?" Mo Ashi flung her arm and threw Gu Feng away. She said coldly, "If it weren't for the fact that you are still useful, I would have killed you long ago. How dare a small Wanxiang sect fight with me? Humph, even your leader has to be polite to me when he sees me. Who do you think you are? How dare you take advantage of me?" As she said this, Mo Ashi pointed at Gu Feng and said murderously, "Let me tell you, I have been planning to destroy the Fox Zen School for 9 years. If you dare to ruin my plan, I promise you that you will suffer a fate worse than death." When Gu Feng heard this, he suddenly shivered. He knew that Mo Ashi did have such magical power. As a cultivator, the most terrible thing was not death, because once they cultivated to the point where their Yin spirit could leave their body, they could transcend life and death. Even if their physical bodies were destroyed, they could be reincarnated in another body. However, if they were caught by some great cultivators, their physical bodies would be imprisoned, their souls would be sealed, and they would be tortured all the time. That would be the most terrifying thing for cultivators. The corner of Gu Feng's eyes twitched. He forced a smile and said, I know. Destroying the Fox Zen School is the common goal of our 6 sections. I'll go and inform them now." Mo Ashi flicked her sleeves and shouted in a low voice, "Go. In 2 weeks at the latest, the 6 sects will take action. At that time, I will be the spy and destroy the Devil sect in one fell swoop, /om/45278941954. Chapter 248. Go to watch net. While Su Chan was escaping from the Fox Zen school under the cover of the night, Li Yundong had just gotten rid of the pile of patients. He was a person who could be persuaded but not cowed. When others greeted him with a smile, it was difficult for him to say no. Go to watch net. 7 K.O.M. Li Yundong watched until it was dark in a room full of patients. It was not until Zi Yuan called him that he escaped from the crowd. After Li Yundong escaped from the inpatient building, he looked back at the building in fear. Although he had a lot of zhenqi, a fierce tiger could not resist so many wolves. With so many patients, Li Yundong couldn't stand it even if he was made of iron. His face was a little pale, and his steps were a little weak. Zhou Qin, who was beside him, said apologetically, "It's all my fault. If I hadn't been so meddlesome, you wouldn't have been so tired." Li Yundong forced a smile and said, "It's okay. This kind of thing doesn't happen often." Seeing him like this, Zhou Qin felt regretful and distressed. She said, "Why don't I send you back?" Li Yundong saw the Hongqi car parked at the entrance of the hospital. He pointed at the car and said with a smile, "Forget it. Zi Yuan has come to pick me up. You go back first. See you at school tomorrow?" "Oh," Zhou Qin answered. She looked at Li Yundong worriedly and asked, "Are you really okay?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I'm fine. I'll go back and rest." Zhou Qin said reluctantly, Then I'll go back first." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You can go back. You don't have to see me off." As the two of them were talking, they suddenly saw Zi Yuan get out of the car and stand on the side of the road, staring at them. She did not urge Li Yundong, but just stood quietly beside the car, like a virtuous wife waiting for her husband to return. Seeing this, Zhou Qin couldn't help but feel a little jealous. She said, "Forget it. I'll stay here and watch you go." Li Yundong didn't think too much about it. He walked to the front of the car, opened the door, and waved at Zhou Qin as a farewell. Then, he got into the car. Zhou Qin watched Li Yundong get into the car, and then the Hongqi car drove away with a roar. She couldn't help but feel lost for a moment and let out a faint sigh. She stood alone under the cold moonlight for a long time before slowly walking back to the hospital. Li Yundong sighed as soon as he got into the car. "If you hadn't called me today, I might have died there." Zi Yuan glanced at him through the rearview mirror and frowned. "How did you end up like this? The loss of vitality is so severe?" Li Yundong told her about what had happened in the hospital with a wry smile. Zi Yuan couldn't help complaining and sighing, "You are really reckless. Heaven's retribution is coming, and it's time to hide your qi. How could you give your precious zhenqi to others? Nonsense, truly nonsense." Li Yundong smiled sheepishly. "I was in a difficult position, wasn't I?" As he watched Zi Yuan skillfully driving the car, he suddenly thought of something and asked, "When did you learn to drive? Do you have a driver's license?" Zi Yuan glanced at him faintly. "I learned it in the past few days. Hong Ling isn't here, so no one will drive for me. I'll go to the internet." 7 K.O.M. Li Yundong smiled and said, "I can drive for you." Zi Yuan couldn't help rolling her eyes at him. "You? Forget it, I don't dare to trouble you." Li Yundong thought of the two of them driving in Tibet and couldn't help laughing dryly. As Zi Yuan drove, she asked casually, "Did you cure Zhou Qin?" Li Yundong was stunned, but then he nodded and sighed slightly. "Yes, she really suffered a lot." Zi Yuan smiled and looked at Li Yundong meaningfully. "Don't you like her at all?" Li Yundong thought for a moment, then shook his head. "If I hadn't known Su Chan, I would definitely have liked her. But..." As he said this, he shrugged his shoulders and spread out his hands. "But I don't feel like there's a connection between me and Su Chan. What should I do?" This kind of thing can't be forced. Zi Yuan was stunned. She turned her head and looked at Li Yundong in confusion. What do you mean by a connection? Li Yundong smiled and said, when you have someone you love in the future, you will know. I can't explain it to you. Zi Yuan was silent when she heard this. She drove back to Hongsheng New area with a complicated expression. When they returned to Li Yundong's home, Zi Yuan followed him in. She was silent for a long time. When Li Yundong sat down cross-legged and began to meditate, she suddenly said, "Do you feel the omen of heaven's retribution?" Li Yundong hadn't expected Zi Yuan to suddenly ask such a question. He asked in confusion, "No, can you feel it?" Zi Yuan nodded slowly. She looked up at the vast starry sky outside the balcony and said in a deep voice, "I can feel the energy gathering in the sky growing bit by bit. You've been busy with the affairs of the secular world these days, so you can't calm down, so you naturally can't feel it. Go to the internet. 7KOM. Now calm down and feel the power in the air around you. You will feel the difference." Li Yundong had rarely seen Zi Yuan show such a solemn and serious expression. He couldn't help but look serious. He closed his eyes and began to qi. With this qi, he quickly entered the small Zhou-Tian realm, and then entered the great Zhou-Tian realm. It didn't take long for him to feel that his lost Jinqi was quickly being replenished. Then, this vigorous Jinqi continued to spread and climb around like tentacles. When his Jinqi spread out of the balcony like a rising tide, he suddenly felt a tingling sensation coming to his face. In an instant, Li Yundong felt that in his spirit space, the sky was rolling with dark clouds. It really had the terrifying effect of dark clouds pressing down on the city. These rolling dark clouds condensed into a vague face. There was no nose, ears, or mouth, only a pair of cold eyes, which looked extremely dignified. When this pair of eyes stared at Li Yundong, he felt all the hair on his body stand on end. This feeling was extremely terrifying, just like the last time he had been stared at by heavenly thunder in the air. Li Yundong was so scared that he immediately woke up from his meditation. His face was slightly pale, and a layer of cold sweat broke out on his back. He looked frightened and a little lost in thought. Zi Yuan saw it clearly from the side. She asked softly, "How is it? Can you feel a pair of eyes staring at you in your spirit space?" Li Yundong turned his head and looked at Zi Yuan in surprise. "How do you know?" Zi Yuan smiled slightly. Once the cultivators in the world pass the Zhuji phase and begin to practice Shentong, they will be noticed by heaven. Especially before the divine tribulation comes, a pair of eyes will appear in the spirit space. These eyes are the heavenly eyes, which are always monitoring the cultivators' Shentong. Once they grow to a certain extent, the divine tribulation will automatically come to them. Li Yundong was stunned. After a while, he said with a wry smile, "So I can't cultivate now, and I can't not cultivate either? The faster I cultivate, the faster the divine tribulation will come?" Zi Yuan sighed softly. "Yes, that's indeed the case. If you don't cultivate, the divine tribulation will still come. When it comes, the weaker your spiritual power is, the more impossible it will be for you to survive it. But the faster you cultivate, the faster the divine tribulation will come." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "Damn it, aren't you kidding me?" Zi Yuan stared at Li Yundong and asked solemnly, "Are you sure you want to continue cultivating?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Of course, how can I retreat because of fear? It's just that I don't know how to cultivate next." Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong's face for a long time before she slowly showed a look of approval. She nodded slightly and said, "Well, I'll teach you the next cultivation." Li Yundong was overjoyed. "That's great." Zi Yuan said, "Shentong is the fifth of the 9 heavens. I believe you should already know this." Li Yundong listened carefully, like a student eager for knowledge. He nodded. Zi Yuan then said, the Shentong is divided into 3 realms, the Little Shentong, the Medium Shentong, and the Great Shentong. Li Yundong asked curiously, what's the difference between the 3? Is it just the size of the Shentong's spiritual power? What's the standard? Zi Yuan smiled approvingly and said, not bad, you know why. The difference between the 3 is easy to distinguish. The Little Shentong focuses on strengthening one's self-control. For example, Lin Youfa of the Immortal Fist sect cultivates a Little Shentong. Li Yunyang immediately thought of the few times he had fought with Lin Youfa. When Lin Youfa had invited Marshal Tianpeng to possess him, he had seen his terrifying appearance. He couldn't help but ask with a face full of doubt, when I saw him invite God to possess him, it was no different from a god descending to the world. Is this also a minor Shentong? Zi Yuan chuckled and said, although the 3 great Shentong have different names, there is actually no difference between the 3 realms. Li Yundong asked in confusion, then why is it said that the Little Shentong is the Great Shentong? Zi Yuan explained, since Zhang Ling founded our Taoist sect in the Han dynasty, there have been countless cultivators for thousands of years. Their cultivation methods and paths are also different. Some people focus on cultivating their self-control in order to reach the way of heaven. Some people focus on cultivating talismans and magic weapons in order to reach the way of heaven. Some people focus on cultivating the qi of heaven and earth in order to become immortals. These 3 kinds of people, because of their different cultivation methods and different levels of difficulty, are divided into Little Shentong, Medium Shentong, and Great Shentong. As Zi Yuan spoke, she also sat cross-legged in front of Li Yundong and spoke with confidence. Li Yundong still asked with a puzzled face, but last time I heard from Ao Wushuang that he knows more than a dozen Great Shentong and dozens of Little Shentong? What do you mean? Zi Yuan smiled and said, this Shentong is not that kind of Shentong. The Shentong that Ao Wushuang is talking about refers to magic, and the Shentong I'm talking about is the path and method of cultivation. Li Yundong suddenly understood. Oh, I see. I understand. I remember you told me last time that the cultivation of Shentong is to constantly strengthen one's Niden. Zi Yuan said, that's right, but this kind of cultivation is aimless. It's just to consolidate the foundation and cultivate the primordial spirit. The reason why I didn't teach you at that time was because you had just reached the Zhuji phase and your Niden was not strong enough to further cultivate Shentong. Li Yundong asked, what kind of Shentong are you cultivating? Zi Yuan said, I started with Little Shentong and supplemented it with Medium Shentong. When I was 17 years old, I had already cultivated to the realm of Great Shentong. Li Yundong asked curiously, is your Zhengyi school the cultivation method of Little Shentong? Zi Yuan nodded and said, now, 9 out of 10 cultivators in the world start with Little Shentong, because the cultivation methods of Little Shentong are the most extensive and the safest. They are the most suitable for cultivators to cultivate step by step. Li Yunyang said with a wry smile, I'm a little confused by the Little Shentong, Medium Shentong, and Great Shentong. Isn't the Little Shentong, Medium Shentong, and Great Shentong a bit like the difference between internal and external punching skills? Zi Yuan nodded approvingly. That's right. To put it simply, Little Shentong is more like internal punching skills. It mainly trains one's internal organs and meridians, but it's difficult to achieve in a short time. Medium Shentong focuses on the cultivation of talismans and magical items. For example, external punching skills, it's very easy for cultivators to achieve it quickly. Moreover, the fighting capacity of the early and middle stages is extremely strong. Li Yundong thought for a moment and asked, if I understand correctly, in fact, a cultivator can choose to start with Little Shentong, Medium Shentong, or Great Shentong. But when the Shentong realm is cultivated to the consummation, it must be the combination of Big Shentong, Medium Shentong, and Great Shentong. Zi Yuan clapped her hands and praised, "You are worth teaching." Li Yundong laughed and said, "You look like an old teacher." Zi Yuan's cheeks were slightly red. She glared at Li Yundong and said, "I was kind enough to teach you, but you came to ridicule me. You are so heartless." Li Yundong rarely saw Zi Yuan's expression. At a glance, he saw that under the light, the beauty was like jade. She was slightly angry and had a unique charm, especially the expression between her eyebrows. Her eyebrows were really like mountain peaks, and her eyes were like autumn waves. Her beautiful posture made people's hearts tremble. Li Yundong's heart couldn't help pounding. He looked away, smiled awkwardly, and changed the topic. "In that case, I want to start learning from the great Shentong." Chapter 249. Go to watch net. Zi Yuan had rarely lost her composure before. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she couldn't help but ridicule him. "You haven't even learned how to walk, and you want to learn how to run? Let me tell you, the great Shentong has long been lost. Now almost all cultivators start with the small and medium Shentong, and finally can cultivate the effect of the great Shentong. Go to watch net." Updated at a very fast speed. Li Yundong was stunned. Lost? The kung fu of cultivating the qi of heaven and earth has been lost? Isn't that a pity? Zi Yuan also sighed and said, "Yes, although I eventually reached the realm of the great Shentong through the cultivation of the small Shentong and medium Shentong, it was not achieved through the cultivation of the great Shentong after all. I don't have the vast aura that the great Shentong is born with. I can't understand the feeling of taking the essence of heaven and earth for my own use. What a pity." Li Yundong smiled and said, "Your cultivation is very strange. It seems that you want to experience all kinds of feelings in the world." Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and said meaningfully, "Of course, I have always been a cultivator. Only by experiencing all kinds of things in the world can I have a strong mind and have a better chance of winning when facing the thunder retribution." As she said this, she sighed softly in her heart. "My master said that if I want to pass the divine retribution, I must pass you. Otherwise, I will have no hope of cultivating immortality in this life. But, how can I get past you?" Zi Yuan thought faintly. Her heart was in a mess. Now, Zi Yuan had already regarded the psalms left by her master as the goal of her cultivation. She had entered the world to solve this puzzle, and then she could cultivate to become an immortal. While she was struggling here, Li Yundong said, "I heard so much from you just now, and I roughly understand some things. Among the three kinds of Shentong, the great Shentong has been lost, so let's not worry about it for the time being. The cultivation of the small Shentong is the slowest, but there are many methods and enough momentum. As long as you keep practicing, you will most likely be able to reach the realm of the great Shentong. The medium Shentong is the fastest, but there are not many methods, and it relies too much on external things. Although it is successful, it lacks momentum. Is that so?" Zi Yuan nodded and said, "Yes, there are two paths in front of you now. One is to start with the minor supernatural power and cultivate step by step in a down-to-earth manner. The other is to start with the medium supernatural power. I'll use an external artifact to help you steal the secrets of heaven and take a shortcut to quickly increase your magic power. However, this is very, very dangerous. If you're not careful, you'll be crushed into pieces and your body and soul will be destroyed." Li Yundong's expression suddenly became solemn and he asked, "How do I cultivate the little Shentong? How do you cultivate the medium divine art?" Zi Yuan said, "The method of the little magical power is to cultivate it through the method of dual cultivation of life and death." When Li Yundong heard the words, life and death dual cultivation, he couldn't help thinking about it, and his expression became strange. "Life and death dual cultivation? You and me?" Zi Yuan didn't react for a moment and said curiously, "Of course it's you." Li Yundong had a strange look on his face. "Myself? How am I supposed to dual cultivate by myself? Could it be with my hands?" At this time, Zi Yuan reacted. Her face suddenly turned red. She glared at Li Yundong shyly and angrily and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? The life and death dual cultivation I'm talking about means Buddhism and Taoism. How can you think of that?" Only then did Li Yundong realize that he had misunderstood. He said with an embarrassed smile, "Why does life and death dual cultivation mean Buddhism and Taoism?" Zi Yuan's cheeks were red. She was so embarrassed by Li Yundong's words that her earlobes were so red that they seemed to be dripping blood. She glared at Li Yundong angrily again, bit her lip, and said, "In the Northern Song dynasty, Zhenren Ziyang, Zhang Buduan, once said." Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan's cheeks were rosy, and the corners of her eyes were rolling. Her usually beautiful face suddenly became shy, and her beauty immediately doubled. He couldn't help but be a little stunned. Looking at Zi Yuan's face, he was a little infatuated for a moment, until Zi Yuan couldn't help but shout angrily, "What are you looking at? I'm talking to you." Only then did Li Yundong wake up as if from a dream. He looked up to the sky and laughed dryly. "No, nothing. Go on. What did Zhang Buduan say?" Zi Yuan suppressed the shyness in her heart. She bit her lip and glared at Li Yundong angrily for a long time. When her anger subsided a little, she said, "Zhenren Ziyang said, Taoism is based on fate, so it talks about fate and nature in detail. Buddhism is based on nature, so it talks about fate and nature in detail. Go to see the net. 7 KOM. Color. Text. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. New. Li Yundong coughed dryly and asked, "What does that mean?" Zi Yuan said, "It means that Taoism pays more attention to the cultivation of one's own body and ignores the cultivation of one's nature and spirit, while Buddhism likes philosophical debate and spiritual cultivation, but ignores the cultivation of the body." Li Yundong asked in confusion, "Isn't this still the difference between internal and external punching techniques? You should know that simply cultivating the internal or the external is biased after all. One should cultivate both at the same time." The shyness in Zi Yuan's heart gradually disappeared. When she heard Li Yundong's words, she couldn't help but praise, "You're right. You are indeed the successor of Jin Dan. I can't believe that you are a cultivator who has been cultivating for less than half a year. Zhang Buduan believes that only the Niden that combines Taoism and Zen and cultivates both life and death is the best. Go to the internet." He asked curiously, "In the Northern Song dynasty, Zhang Buduan already knew that he wanted to cultivate both Buddhism and Taoism? Then why is the gap between Buddhism and Taoism still so deep after that? Even you think that Buddhism and Taoism can't be cultivated at the same time?" Zi Yuan sighed and said, "Knowing and doing are two different things. Zhang Buduan himself advocates the cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism, but in fact, he emphasizes more on the dual cultivation of mind and body, which is different from the real cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism. Our Taoism has been around for nearly 2,000 years, but among so many cultivators, only people like Chao Huanyang, Wu Shouyang, and Lu Huayang have cultivated the combination of immortals and Buddhists, truly integrating Buddhism and Taoism into one. It can be seen how difficult this matter is. I just thought that it was too difficult. There are too few people who cultivate to become immortals in this way. So many sects regard the cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism as a false way, comparable to wild fox Zen." Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, "If it's so difficult, then why do you say that it's easier than the method of Taoism? Are you kidding me? In that case, how perverted would the divine ability be?" Zi Yuan said, cultivation is the most difficult thing in the world. If it were so easy, the world would have been full of immortals. Li Yundong smiled bitterly and said, well, since the cultivation of both Buddhism and Taoism is so difficult, how do you know that I can complete it in such a short period of time? Zi Yuan stared at Li Yundong with bright eyes and said, you have a strange and rare opportunity. Although you entered the Tao with Jin Dan and cultivated the Zhuji phase using the Taoist method, after you reached the Zhuji phase, you learned the Buddhist mantra Mahamudra without a teacher. In this way, your Niden can be said to have the characteristics of the fusion of Buddhism and Taoism. You can use both Taoist magic and Buddhist magic. Speaking of this, Zi Yuan suddenly showed a puzzled look. She looked Li Yundong up and down and said, I have observed all the cultivators in the cultivation world, but I have never seen anyone with such talent as you, nor have I seen anyone with such a coincidence. Logically speaking, you can't use Buddhist magic at all when you use the Taoist method to cultivate Niden, but you can use it without any difficulty, which makes me puzzled. Are you really an ordinary person? Li Yundong laughed and said, maybe I am a very extraordinary ordinary person. In fact, when I was learning, I didn't think about anything. Just like drawing on a blank piece of paper, I could naturally draw at will. But cultivators like you have received orthodox cultivation training since you were born and have been instilled with dogmatic cultivation theories. Just like a piece of paper full of drawings, it is naturally difficult for you to draw anything on it. No, the barrier between Buddhism and Taoism is very strict. If it were so simple, Buddhism and Taoism would have merged for thousands of years. Zi Yuan shook her head subconsciously, but after a while she nodded again. She frowned and said to herself, but, apart from this explanation, it seems that there is no other explanation. Li Yundong said indifferently, why do you care so much? How do you think I should practice the dual cultivation of life and death? Zi Yuan came to her senses and said, it's very simple. Just read more Buddhist magic books. Since your Niden is a fusion of Buddhism and Taoism, you will naturally understand it if you read more books. Although this method is a little stupid, there is no better way at present. Li Yundong said with a wry smile, then when will it take? Divine tribulation won't give me so much time. What's the way? How can I steal the secret of heaven and take a shortcut? Zi Yuan said, it's very simple. I'll use a magical item to create a spirit space for you and then simulate the scene of the arrival of divine tribulation. I'll let you taste the taste of divine tribulation first and realize the rapid growth of your spiritual energy in the great horror of life and death. Li Yundong asked in confusion, why can my spiritual energy grow rapidly in the great horror of life and death? Zi Yuan said, the human body has potential. Ordinary people can burst out with power that they usually don't have at a critical moment of life and death. A thin old woman can also lift a car. The same is true for cultivators. In the great horror of life and death, they can constantly stimulate their potential for cultivation. Of course, you can understand this behavior as overdrawing, but this is the only way to increase your cultivation in a short period of time. Li Yundong pondered for a while, then raised his head and said resolutely, then I want to try this method. When I was visualizing just now, I felt that the divine tribulation seemed to be a matter of a few days. Although the method of dual cultivation of life and death is good, for me, distant water can't put out a nearby fire, so I have to take a risk. Zi Yuan nodded. She didn't seem to move, but suddenly a stream of light surged in her hand, and a purple and gold-rimmed compass suddenly appeared. Li Yundong looked at it and saw that the compass was about the size of a palm. It looked like it was made of purple jade, and there were some strange patterns on it. They looked like scales, but also like runes. Li Yundong asked curiously, is this your powerful magical weapon? What's its use? Zi Yuan said with a profound look in her eyes, this is a powerful magical weapon passed down to me by my master. It's one of the 3 most powerful magical weapons of the Zhengyi school's Linggong sect. It's called the purple gold jade plate. It has endless magical uses. One of them is that it allows the caster to create a spirit space out of thin air and pull the people around him into this spirit space. Li Yundong asked in confusion, "What's the use of pulling people in?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "You'll know its magical use in a while." After that, she spread out her palm and spread the purple gold jade plate in the air. After a while, the jade plate began to spin rapidly on its own, emitting a golden light. At first, the golden light was relatively dim, but as the jade plate spun faster and faster, the golden light became more and more dazzling. Gradually, Li Yundong felt that the golden light was so dazzling that he was blind. He couldn't help but close his eyes. But even if he closed his eyes, he still felt that the golden light in front of him was stimulating his eyeballs through his eyelids. It wasn't until more than a minute later that it slowly faded away. When Li Yundong opened his eyes again, he found himself standing in the air between heaven and earth. Under his feet were mountains and rivers, rising and falling one after another, stretching endlessly. It was extremely magnificent. "Where is this?" Li Yundong asked in surprise. "This is the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate." Zi Yuan's voice suddenly rang in Li Yundong's ear. Li Yundong turned his head and looked around, but he didn't see Zi Yuan. He couldn't help but shout, "So magical! Are these all fake? Is it the same as what I imagined?" Zi Yuan said, "You can say that, but the heavenly thunder in a while is real." Li Yundong was stunned. "What do you mean?" There was a hint of joy in Zi Yuan's voice, as if she had avenged the humiliation she had suffered just now. "Because if you are struck to death by heavenly thunder here, your physical body outside will also die." Li Yundong was taken aback. "F***ck, are you serious?" As he spoke, the wind and clouds surged above Li Yundong's head, and the dark clouds rolled. With a crack, a bolt of lightning struck him heavily. /OM/45278941954 Chapter 250. Go to watch net. This bolt of heavenly thunder came fast and fierce. Li Yundong didn't have time to react at all and was hit heavily by it. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. At this moment, Li Yundong's figure in the spirit space was instantly swallowed by the heavenly thunder and disappeared in the blink of an eye. In the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate, he had been killed in an instant. Outside the spirit space, Li Yundong suddenly opened his eyes and looked at himself in horror. He kept touching his body, as if he wanted to see if there were any parts missing. Zi Yuan couldn't help pursing her lips and smiling. "What are you doing?" Li Yundong asked in shock, "I'm still alive?" Zi Yuan turned her face away and chuckled. Then she turned back and tried hard to hold back her laughter. "You've already died once." Li Yundong opened his mouth wide. "Didn't you just say that if I was killed by the heavenly thunder inside, my body outside would also die?" Zi Yuan smiled and said, "I lied to you, can't I?" Li Yundong smiled bitterly. "You almost scared me to death just now. The moment I was struck by the thunder, I was so shocked that I thought I was going to die." Zi Yuan stopped smiling and looked at Li Yundong seriously. "How does it feel to be struck by heavenly thunder? Have you experienced the great horror of life and death?" Li Yundong's expression was solemn. He remembered the moment when he had been struck by the thunder just now and couldn't help but shiver. "I've experienced it. It's really terrifying. At that moment, I seemed to be able to see the little things that I had experienced with Su Chan in the past. I've always heard that people will recall their happiest moments before they die, so I really thought I was going to die at that time. At that moment, I had a feeling that everything around me was empty, as if I didn't exist, and there was only that terrible heavenly thunder in the world." Li Yundong said, heavenly thunder is the power of heaven, and the power of heaven is unpredictable. This is true. Zi Yuan asked, do you want to try this feeling again? Li Yundong took a deep breath. He hesitated for a moment, but still said resolutely, yes. Zi Yuan nodded. Just now, I told you that if you were struck to death by heavenly thunder, your physical body outside would also die. That was because I wanted you to experience the great horror of life and death. You can only experience it the first time. It will be very difficult for you to experience it again in the future. Li Yundong laughed and said, you sly bastard. It's obvious that you're using your position to avenge a personal grudge. Don't quibble, the eyes of the people are clear. Zi Yuan pursed her lips and said with a smile, don't be glib. Do you want to go in again? Think about it. The more times you go in, the more powerful the heavenly thunder will be. Once the power of the heavenly thunder reaches a certain degree, the more severe the wounds you will receive in this dimension will be. Although it can enhance your magic power and true essence, it will also affect your will and mind, causing you to subconsciously fear the heavenly thunder more and more. Have you thought it through? Li Yundong waved his hand indifferently and said with a smile, what's there to think about? Anyway, it doesn't matter whether I stick my head out or not. Hurry up, let me go in again to play. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong with admiration. When cultivators in the cultivation world saw heavenly thunder, it was as if they had seen a life-demanding ghost. They were all scared to death, but the person in front of her didn't seem to be afraid at all. Instead, he kept urging her. Go to the net. Zi Yuan gently wiped the purple gold jade plate in front of her, and it began to spin rapidly again. There was a burst of golden light, and Li Yundong couldn't help but close his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he was no longer in midair. Instead, he was standing on a flat grassland with lofty mountains and precipitous ridges behind him. Li Yundong looked around curiously, only to find that Zi Yuan had also come in. She was wearing a large dark purple Taoist robe, and her clothes were fluttering in the wind, making her look like a fairy. Li Yundong smiled and said, Zhenren, where do you come from and where are you going? Zi Yuan and Li Yundong had been together for a long time, so she was more or less human. She cooperatively formed a palm with one hand and saluted. Ba, I came from Mount Longhu and am going to the 9th heaven. May I know where you are from and where are you going? Li Yundong imitated Zi Yuan's style and said seriously, Ba, I came from the Tang dynasty of the East, and I specially went to the Western heaven to worship Buddha and ask for his hand in marriage. Zi Yuan couldn't help laughing out loud. If Lu Huayang and Wu Shouyang knew that you were such a combination of immortals and Buddhas, I'm afraid they would be so angry that they would jump around. Li Yundong also chuckled and said, I'm good at cultivating. Who cares about them? Zi Yuan's laughter gradually stopped. She looked up at the sky and saw that the originally blue and cloudless sky was quickly gathering dark clouds. Lightning was rolling in the clouds, which was extremely frightening. She said, the heavenly thunder will come soon. You must remember to hide as much as you can. This is because when the heavenly lightning strikes down, a powerful heavenly might will leak out from the heavenly lightning. What you need to do is to absorb as much of this heavenly might as you dodge. Li Yundong asked in confusion, isn't this spirit space virtual? How come the heavens might divine power that was absorbed here can be used in the vast thousand worlds? Zi Yuan said, why did you appear in this spirit space? It's all because the violet gold jade disc captured a trace of your quintessential essence aura and created a person like you based on that trace of quintessential essence. Similarly, the heaven and earth heavenly lightning is also a scene created by the violet gold jade disc capturing the heaven and earth spiritual chi. Go to the net. 7 KOM. You should know that the purple gold jade plate has existed for thousands of years. It has been absorbing the chi of heaven and earth for thousands of years, and the energy it has stored is extremely powerful. Although the simulated heavenly thunder is not as good as the real heavenly thunder, it is not far from it. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He slapped his thigh and said loudly, "I understand. Isn't this the same as playing in online games? F***ck, this magical item is too powerful. It can allow people to play infinitely. Doesn't that mean that their strength can become infinitely stronger?" Zi Yuan couldn't help but roll her eyes at Li Yundong and said angrily, "You wish. Even I am reluctant to use the energy stored in the purple gold jade plate. Moreover, this is a shortcut. If I use it too much, I will be punished by heaven. Besides, this kind of power that is obtained through trickery is ultimately not as useful as the power that is obtained through one's own hard work and cultivation bit by bit." Li Yundong chuckled and said, "You are reluctant to use it, but you gave it to me. How can I repay you?" Zi Yuan said angrily, "If you don't make fun of me, it will be enough to repay me." Li Yundong's face was serious. "Don't worry, I will never make fun of you again. If I make fun of you again, I will be struck by lightning." After that, he immediately smiled and said, "Miss Hua, how old are you this year?" As soon as his voice fell, a bolt of heavenly thunder suddenly fell from the sky. In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong, who was in the spirit space, was smashed to pieces. Li Yundong suddenly woke up. Seeing Zi Yuan covering her mouth and laughing, he couldn't help but say angrily, "F***ck, it's fine if the heavenly thunder wants to strike me, but at least let me know in advance." Zi Yuan said with a smile, "This is divine retribution. Who told you to be so glib? If you do this again, I won't let you in." Li Yundong smiled awkwardly and said, "Fairy sister, I know I was wrong. Can't I apologize now?" Zi Yuan glanced at Li Yundong and pursed her lips into a smile. "Your attitude is not bad. Forget it, I forgive you." After that, she once again used her magical power to bring Li Yundong into the spirit space. This time, Li Yundong was mentally prepared. The moment the heavenly thunder struck down, he keenly felt a powerful force falling from the sky, which made his hair stand on end. Li Yundong's figure suddenly moved, and in an instant, he moved to a different position. With a bang, he saw that the heavenly thunder had struck a deep pit, and smoke was rising faintly. Li Yundong leaned over to take a look and saw that the pit was bottomless, which was creepy. He laughed dryly and said, "Such a terrifying heavenly thunder, didn't I still avoid it?" But before he could finish speaking, another bolt of lightning came down from the sky and struck him squarely on his body. In the blink of an eye, Li Yundong was sent back to the spirit space. He said angrily, "How can there be more after avoiding it?" Zi Yuan couldn't help laughing and said, "Do you think there is only one bolt of lightning in the heavenly tribulation? You take it too lightly. Why are we cultivators afraid of heavenly tribulation? Because once the heavenly tribulation is launched, there will be 81 bolts of heavenly thunder, each more powerful and fierce than the last. It will continue until the target is killed, otherwise, the heavenly tribulation will not stop." Li Yundong was shocked. 81 times? I have to dodge 81 times in a row? This is too exaggerated, isn't it? Zi Yuan said, "Of course, otherwise why would we cultivators change our expressions when we talk about heavenly tribulation?" Li Yundong took a deep breath, and his expression changed. After a while, he said in a low voice, "I see. Let me in again." When Li Yundong entered the spirit space of the purple gold luo jade plate again, he was mentally prepared. After dodging the first bolt of heavenly thunder, he dodged the second. But when the third bolt of heavenly thunder came, its speed and power were suddenly twice as fierce as the previous two. Li Yundong was caught off guard and was struck out of the spirit space in the blink of an eye. As soon as Li Yundong opened his eyes, he shouted unwillingly, again, I don't believe it." Zi Yuan smiled slightly and once again used her shentong to let Li Yundong enter the spirit space. This time, Li Yundong held his breath and concentrated on feeling the power of the heavenly thunder. After dodging 3 bolts of heavenly thunder in a row, he suddenly felt that when he was dodging, a trace of the power emitted by the heavenly thunder had unconsciously integrated into his body. At first, Li Yundong didn't understand why he could absorb this power, but after thinking about it, he understood. He thought, this is the same as basking in the sun. Turtles often climb ashore to bask in the sun in the morning. Because the tortoise's back was yang, and the yang qi was the strongest in the morning, basking in the sun at this time was to absorb the yang qi between heaven and earth. The tortoise had absorbed the yang qi for a long time, so the tortoise's back could be used as medicine, which was a great tonic. Modern cultivators combined the theory of cultivation with modern science. They believed that life was a body of energy, and according to Newton's law of universal gravitation, strong energy would attract weak energy to itself. Although the energy of the sun was far greater than that of the tortoise, when the sun shone on the distant ground, this energy had been extremely dispersed and weakened. The energy of the tortoise exceeded the energy of the sun, so it could absorb this weak energy. The same was true of heavenly thunder. Of course, the power of a heavenly thunder was amazing, but after the strike, some of its energy was inevitably scattered between heaven and earth. Compared with Li Yundong, this energy was much weaker. Naturally, it would be automatically attracted by Li Yundong's energy body and turn into his own. Understanding this, Li Yundong couldn't help but be excited. But as soon as he was excited, the 4th bolt of heavenly thunder in the sky struck him and sent him back to the spirit space. After Li Yundong opened his eyes, he tasted the sweetness of absorbing the power of heaven and earth. He urged Zi Yuan excitedly, come on, come on. Seeing that Li Yundong was eager to try and was full of energy, Zi Yuan reminded him, be careful not to be too excited. You have to be calm. This is the way of cultivation. After that, she sent Li Yundong into the spirit space again. Li Yundong went back and forth like this, shuttling between the spirit space and the spirit space 13 times in a row. By the 14th time, he could already dodge 32 heavenly thunder. When he came out for the 14th time, although Li Yundong felt that his Jinqi was much stronger than before, he felt very tired. Li Yundong waved his hand to Zi Yuan and said, let me take a break and catch my breath. As he said this, he tilted his head and suddenly laughed. Why do I feel like I'm playing a game like, if you're a man, go down to the 100th floor? Zi Yuan blinked her eyes in confusion and asked, what did you say? Li Yundong smiled and said, nothing, it's just a small game. He closed his eyes and ran his qi for a while. After turning the power he had absorbed into his own, he opened his eyes. When he opened his eyes, he found that it was already dawn. Zi Yuan was in the living room, setting the bowls and chopsticks. Zi Yuan greeted him and said, you're awake? Come over and have dinner. Li Yundong didn't stand on ceremony. After sitting down and having a hearty meal, he waved his hand and urged Zi Yuan, again, I must pass 60 times today. Hey, it's quite fun. If you're a man, you'll dodge 81 times. After saying that, he burst out laughing. He was depressed. He deleted the post, but all the posts on the first page had disappeared. All the pinned posts had disappeared. He was so depressed that he was going crazy. Chapter 251. Go to Watch Network. While Li Yundong was cultivating in seclusion, Ruan Hongling had just placed the souls of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao in the Tianyi Pond of the Heavenly Water Cave, the forbidden area of Linggong sect. The Heavenly Water Cave was the most secluded place in Linggong sect. The huge cave was winding, and the surrounding walls were smooth and tidy. It was obvious that they had been built by craftsmen. The statues of the ancestors of Linggong's sect were carved on them. They were in different postures and looked majestic. There was a man-made pond in the depths of the cave. The pond was not very big, only about 10 square meters. It was filled with deep green water, and there were dozens of green lotus leaves floating on the water. Ruan Hongling gently touched the green water in front of the pond, and then 2 peach-red flower buds appeared in front of her. One was slightly larger on the left and the other was slightly larger on the right. Ruan Hongling shook her head when she saw them. She gently touched the 2 flower buds with her hand, and they quickly bloomed and produced 2 lotus heads. Then they quickly withered and the lotus seeds in the lotus heads fell into the water. After a while, another pair of flower buds grew, but this time, the left one was slightly smaller and the right one was slightly larger. Ruan Hongling repeated this countless times. It was not until 2 days and 1 night later that a pair of flower buds with the same color, shape, and appearance finally grew in the pond. When Ruan Hongling saw this, she was immediately overjoyed. She lowered her head and reached out to untie a necklace hanging on her chest. Then, she stroked the necklace with her right hand and immediately held out 2 small balls of light, one red and the other blue. Ruan Hongling spread her palm flat in front of the flower buds and blew gently. The red and blue balls of light gently fell on the 2 flower buds and quickly merged into them. The pair of flower buds trembled slightly, but they did not wither as quickly as the previous flowers. Instead, the flower branches drooped and became motionless. Only the middle of the pair of flower buds emitted a faint fluorescent light, one red and one blue, which was a magnificent spectacle. After Ruan Hongling placed the souls of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao, she finally felt relieved. She was about to breathe a sigh of relief when she suddenly heard a woman shouting outside the cave, "Is there anyone alive in Linggong's sect? If there's anyone, come out quickly." When Ruan Hongling heard this, she was furious in her heart. Which blind guy is tired of living? How dare he be so presumptuous here? She immediately rushed out of the cave and arrived in front of the main hall of the Taoist temple. She saw 3 young men in Taoist robes standing in front of the main hall, looking around and sizing up the surroundings. The one on the left was short and fat, and he held an iron tower in his hand. He had an inch of black beard and a haughty expression. The one on the right was a woman in a Taoist robe. She had a graceful figure and a beautiful appearance. She carried a long sword on her back and held a horsetail whisk in her hand. Her eyes constantly looked around. The man in the middle was young and handsome. His eyebrows slanted to his temples. He was empty-handed, but a pair of jade earrings hung from his ears, and his fingers were covered with all kinds of jade rings. As soon as the man saw Ruan Hongling coming out, his eyes lit up. He smiled and took the initiative to step forward, saying, "Amateus, are you Zhenren Zi Yuan of the Linggong sect?" Ruan Hongling glanced at them and quickly realized that their cultivation levels were not low. None of them were below hers, especially the young man in the middle. His cultivation was far higher than hers, and he could even be compared to Zi Yuan. Watch net. Ruan Hongling glared at the woman who had spoken rudely and said with a cold face, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" Before the young man could speak, the Taoist nun next to him hurriedly said, "Are you blind? This is the youngest son of the leader of our Zhengyi school. He is also the last disciple. People call him Zhenren Yuyang Zhang Tianhe. Why, haven't you heard of him?" Ruan Hongling was furious. If it had been any other time, she might have scolded the woman with her hands on her hips and even fought with her. However, the person in front of her had a powerful background. He was the youngest son of the leader of the Zhengyi school and the last disciple. He was the future leader of the Zhengyi school. He could even represent the entire Zhengyi school. Although the Linggong sect belonged to the Zhengyi school, it had developed for thousands of years and had formed a branch of the sect. It was not directly under the control of the Zhengyi school, but no matter what, it was still a sect under the Zhengyi school. They more or less looked up to it. Seeing the son of the leader of the other party, Ruan Hongling unconsciously put on airs. This was because she knew that the Linggong sect had declined so far. She couldn't let the other party underestimate the Linggong sect. Ruan Hongling's face was solemn. She saluted back and said, "My Shiji is not here. What can I do for you?" Ever since Zhang Tianhe started cultivating, he had heard people constantly talk about Zi Yuan's beauty and talent. He had been talking about her so much that his ears had become calloused. Today, he had been ordered to go down the mountain by his master. When he passed by the Linggong sect, he thought of Zi Yuan and took the initiative to propose going to the Linggong sect to invite her to go down the mountain to help. When he saw Ruan Hongling coming out, he thought it was Zi Yuan. Just as he was sighing in his heart that Zi Yuan's beauty was indeed worthy of her reputation, he heard the beautiful girl in front of him say that she was not Zi Yuan, but her Shiji. He suddenly felt a little disappointed. Ah, it turns out to be Zi Yuan's Shiji, Jinren Ruan Hongling? Ruan Hongling said with a cold face, "Yes." Zhang Tianhe saw that her face was as cold as frost, which made her look even more beautiful. On the contrary, he looked forward to Zi Yuan even more. If the Shiji was so beautiful, then what about the Shiji? Thinking of this, the smile on Zhang Tianhe's face became more and more spirited. He said, "We came to your sect specially to invite the masters of your sect to help us. Let's go to the network." 7 K.O.M. Ruan Hongling was stunned. Help? What help? Before Zhang Tianhe could speak, the beautiful Taoist nun next to him said loudly, "Little Shiji, why are you talking to her? I think the Linggong sect is already full of weeds, and the statues are covered with cobwebs. I think the kung fu of their daily cultivation must have been wasted. Why did you invite them? They can't fight, and when the time comes, they will have to take care of them. Wouldn't that be a few more burdens?" The short and fat Taoist priest next to him also stroked his beard and nodded. That's right. Ruan Hongling had a fiery temper, so she couldn't bear it anymore. She stomped her feet and scolded, "What the hell are you talking about? My Shiji doesn't need to teach you a lesson. I can deal with you myself. If you don't believe me, let's fight one-on-one." The beautiful Taoist nun was also so angry that her eyebrows were raised. She sneered and said, "Do you think I'm afraid of a loser like you?" As she spoke, she was about to draw her sword. Zhang Tianhe hurriedly stopped the two of them. No, we are all from the same sect. We can't fight. Otherwise, if the leader blames us, we won't be able to bear the consequences." As he said this, he said to the Taoist nun next to him, "Shiji Zhou Ping, for my sake, okay?" Zhou Ping snorted and moved her hand away from the hilt of the sword behind her. She sneered and said, "If you really have the ability, let's go down the mountain together. When the time comes, let's see each other's true abilities." Ruan Hongling said angrily, "Let's go. What's the big deal?" Zhang Tianhe laughed and said, Well, with the help of the masters of the Linggong sect, our chances of winning have increased a little." The short and fat Taoist snorted and said, "Little Shiji, you think too highly of those witches. The 6 great sects besieging the Fox Zen school is already a sure win. Now with the addition of us, it's a sure thing. Why do you need to invite others?" Ruan Hongling heard it clearly and was shocked. She cried out involuntarily, "Besieging where? The Fox Zen school?" Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, "Yes, it's the evil Fox Zen school." Ruan Hongling had agreed without thinking before, but now she was complaining in her heart. She thought that with the relationship between Li Yundong and Su Chan, he would definitely not sit back and watch the Fox Zen school be besieged. Once he intervened, given the relationship between her Shiji and Li Yundong, she would definitely have a headache. Who would she help then? Ruan Hongling's eyes were wide open. Just as she was in a daze, she heard Zhang Tianhe urge her, "Zhenren Hongling, let's not delay any longer. How about we go now?" Ruan Hongling seemed to wake up from a dream. She hesitated and complained in her heart, but she had been too confident before and couldn't refuse. She had no choice but to bite the bullet and follow them. When the group of people flew to Mount Tianlong near Dongwu City, they found an empty place to settle down. As soon as they landed, Ruan Hongling said in surprise, "Is the Fox Zen School in this place? This place is very close to Dongwu City. The forces of Buddhism and our Taoist sects are very strong here. How dare they take root here?" Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, "This is where Lu Yi, the leader of the Fox Zen School, is cunning. He calculated that ordinary people would think that the Fox Zen School was hiding in the deep mountains and forests, so he did the opposite and hid them right under our noses. This is called the darkness under the lamp." Ruan Hongling asked in confusion, "When did the 6 great sects join forces to deal with the Fox Zen School?" Zhou Ping snorted coldly and said, "Why do you talk so much nonsense?" Ruan Hongling said angrily, "I think it's you who talk too much." Zhang Tianhe quickly came out to smooth things over. He said, "We are all from the same sect. Don't quarrel, don't quarrel." As he said this, he explained to Ruan Hongling, "It's all because the Renyuan Jindan was stolen by Ao Wushuang of the Fox Zen School. Relying on her powerful spiritual energy and powerful magical weapons, she ran amok everywhere and finally aroused public anger. Hey, this time the 6 great sects have joined forces to uproot their nest. Let's see what she can do." Ruan Hongling muttered to herself, "The Renyuan Jindan is not in her hands." However, the 6 great sects have always been dirty with each other. Why are they working together this time? While she was muttering to herself, 2 cars drove over from the side of the road and took them to the hotel near Mount Tianlong. After arriving at the hotel, Ruan Hongling found that the hotel had been booked, and the surroundings were filled with cultivators who were rarely seen. Ruan Hongling looked at these cultivators carefully and saw that most of them were young people. They were the best of the younger generation in the cultivation world or the rising stars. Although these cultivators were young, there were a lot of them. In addition to the 6 great sects, there were also some cultivators from other sects who had heard the news and come to join in the fun. After calculating the strength of these cultivators in her heart, Ruan Hongling secretly took a breath of cold air. Oh my, there are more than a dozen masters in the 6th heaven of the Huanying phase. Although the older generation of the 6 great sects have not come out, this lineup is enough to make the Fox Zen School suffer. It's a small matter that the Fox Zen School has been destroyed. If Su Chan is involved, I'm afraid that Li Yundong will go crazy. It's fine if he goes crazy, but what if my Shiji's cultivation is affected? Thinking of this, Ruan Hongling couldn't sit still. She rolled her eyes and said to Zhang Tianhe, "By the way, why don't I invite my Shiji here? That way, we can also increase our chances of winning." Zhou Ping and the stout Taoist sneered and snorted, but they didn't say anything. Zhang Tianhe was overjoyed. He said, "That's great. I've been fascinated by Zhenren Ziyuan for a long time. Where is she? I'll go and invite her myself." Ruan Hongling was shocked. How could she dare to let Zhang Tianhe follow her? She quickly smiled dryly and said, "She is cultivating in seclusion somewhere. Zhenren Zhang, you can wait here. I'll go." Zhang Tianhe smiled and said, "Well, I'll wait here for your good news." Zhou Ping, who was standing to one side, sneered, "I think you're going to send a message, aren't you?" This sentence shocked Ruan Hongling so much that her heart started pounding. She couldn't help but fly into a rage. She turned her head and glared at Zhou Ping. "I have no grudge against you in my previous life, nor do I have any grudges against you in this life. Why do you have to go against me? If you're not convinced, let's have a fight here." Zhou Ping just couldn't bear to see her get close to Zhang Tianhe, so she had ridiculed her. Seeing that everyone around her was looking at her, and Zhang Tianhe was also secretly glaring at her, she sneered and turned to leave. Ruan Hongling also stopped while she was ahead. She pretended to be angry and rushed out of the hotel. As soon as she left the hotel, her face darkened. Just as she was about to fly up, she suddenly heard a loud bang in the sky. The sound of heavenly thunder was the most sensitive to cultivators. As soon as Ruan Hongling heard this sound, her heart trembled and she subconsciously raised her head. She saw dark clouds covering the sky and the sun in the distance, and an extremely terrible pressure quickly rushed over. At this time, all the cultivators in the hotel heard the sound and rushed out, looking at the sky with frightened or serious expressions. When the beautiful Taoist nun Zhou Ping saw this, she was shocked and cried out involuntarily, "Someone is going through heavenly tribulation? Who is this? Is he crazy? How could he be going through heavenly tribulation in autumn?" Zhang Tianhe was also shocked. He had been cultivating in the mountains. This was the first time he had left the mountains, the first time he had entered the secular world to cultivate, and the first time he had seen heavenly tribulation. A trace of horror and fear flashed through his eyes as he thought to himself, "Is this heavenly tribulation? It's really terrible." When Ruan Hongling saw this, she was shocked and suddenly thought of something. She thought to herself, could it be that Li Yundong's heavenly tribulation has come? Thinking of this, she didn't dare to stay any longer and turned to leave. When the heavenly tribulation came, Ruan Hongling didn't dare to fly. She quickly found a car and went straight to the nearest railway station. /OM/4527894194. Chapter 252. Go to Watch Network. Li Yundong had never expected that he and Zi Yuan would cultivate in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate for a whole week. During this week, Li Yundong didn't go out at all. He kept going back and forth between the spirit space and the spirit space, constantly challenging the heavenly thunder in the spirit space. At the beginning, he could dodge more than 10 bolts of heavenly thunder in a row. Then, he slowly dodged more than 30 bolts of heavenly thunder. In the end, he could even dodge more than 80 bolts of heavenly thunder in a row. After 7 days of intensive, high-intensity training, Li Yundong had become a completely different person. If the cultivation trip to Tibet had made Li Yundong reborn, his Jinqi had been tempered into steel, and he had formed a powerful Niden with the power of heavenly thunder, then this time, the cultivation in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate had made Li Yundong suddenly exert the Jindan's qi in his body to the extreme, stimulating all his potential. At this time, the Niden in the lower dantian of Li Yundong's lower abdomen was more than 3 times stronger than before. Li Yundong's strength and speed had also risen, and the number of heavenly thunder he had dodged increased. In the spirit space, Li Yundong's figure was as fast as a wisp of smoke, shuttling between heaven and earth like lightning. Every time a bolt of heavenly thunder was about to fall, his hair would stand on end. He keenly felt the moment when the heavenly thunder was about to fall, and then dodged in an instant. At the moment he dodged the heavenly thunder, it hit the ground, and the powerful energy of the heavenly thunder instantly scattered in all directions. The few strands of black hair closest to Li Yundong were sucked into his body like gossamer. There were 9 layers in the sky and 9 layers in the earth. When the heavenly tribulation came, cultivators could hide in the 9 heavens or the 9 earths. Therefore, the heavenly tribulation had 81 paths. It struck the cultivators until they had nowhere to hide, and they would not rest until they were dead. After dodging the 79th bolt of heavenly thunder in a row, Li Yundong suddenly became excited. He realized that if he dodged 2 more times, he would be able to survive the 81 bolts of heavenly tribulation. But as soon as this thought flashed through his mind, his hair suddenly stood on end. Without thinking, Li Yundong immediately stamped his feet and flashed dozens of meters away in the blink of an eye. There was a loud rumble as a bolt of lightning struck the spot where he had been standing. In an instant, a large pit with a diameter of 10 meters appeared on the ground. As soon as Li Yundong landed on the ground, he immediately tapped his toes and jumped more than 100 meters away like lightning. A bolt of lightning followed him like a shadow and struck the place where he had landed before, creating another bottomless pit. After dodging 2 fierce heavenly thunder in a row, he found that there was no more heavenly thunder falling from the sky. Instead, the dark clouds kept rolling, as if they were accumulating power. Watch net. Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat. He knew that the next last blow would be an earth-shattering one. He took a deep breath and quickly turned into a residual shadow. He was so fast that he couldn't even see his figure. Li Yundong knew that the heavenly thunder must have locked onto his position before it fell. He was swimming at such an amazing speed, so it was difficult for the heavenly thunder to lock onto his position, let alone hit him. But what Li Yundong had never expected was that just as he was moving quickly, there was a sudden loud bang in the sky. This sound almost shocked Li Yundong out of his wits. At this moment, Li Yundong even had a feeling that the sky had collapsed. In an instant, countless bolts of lightning fell from the spirit space. These bolts of lightning filled every corner of the spirit space. No matter how powerful Li Yundong's Shentong was, there was no way for him to escape this blow. His figure was instantly swallowed up by the heavenly thunder. In the spirit space, Li Yundong was struck down by the last bolt of lightning. He shouted and woke up with a start, sweating profusely. Li Yundong had been fighting with the heavenly thunder in the spirit space before, and it could be said that he had never been tired of it. He had a kind of endless pleasure and excitement as if he was fighting with heaven. But when the last bolt of heavenly thunder came, at this moment, Li Yundong felt the real power of heaven's might. This was an overwhelming power, and there was no room for Li Yundong to resist at all. For the first time, Li Yundong felt fear and terror. Although he had already woken up, all the hair on his body was still standing on end. Every pore on his body was opening hysterically, as if they were about to let out a silent scream of fear. Go to the net. The moment he was struck by the heavenly thunder just now, Li Yundong felt as if an invisible big hand had reached out from the sky. This big hand was like the 5 fingers mountain of Buddha, pressing down on him, traveling monk's son, so that he had no room to resist at all. He could only surrender and wait for death. Can I really survive the heavenly tribulation? Li Yundong's Taoist heart, which was as hard as steel, cracked in an instant. After all, he was not an idiot, nor was he ignorant. No matter how fearless and brave he was, it was impossible for him to remain unmoved in the face of such heavenly might. Zi Yuan, who was standing to one side, couldn't help but feel her heart tremble when she saw his terrified expression. She thought to herself, oh no, he's wavering. Taoism placed great emphasis on the cultivation of one's mind. If one's mind was not firm, even if they had great magical powers, they might not be able to use them, let alone defeat cultivators with lower cultivation levels than themselves. However, a person with a firm mind would be able to exert his strength to the greatest extent. He could even often perform exceptionally well and defeat cultivators who were stronger than him but did not have a firm mind. The heavenly tribulation could be said to be the most powerful enemy that every cultivator had to face. In the face of such a powerful enemy, Li Yundong's mind was actually wavering. This could be said to be devastating news. Zi Yuan asked, "What's wrong with you?" Li Yundong stared straight ahead, his eyes unfocused. After a long time, he came to his senses and looked at Zi Yuan. He said slowly in a low voice, I think I can't survive the heavenly tribulation. Although Zi Yuan had already guessed that Li Yundong was wavering, when she heard him say it with her own ears, her heart still skipped a beat and suddenly sank. She asked, what happened? Even if you can't escape the heavenly tribulation, you don't have to be so discouraged. Li Yundong slowly closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and then exhaled heavily. He sighed and said, "The last heavenly thunder made me understand that the heavenly tribulation is so terrifying. No matter how capable I am, it's impossible for me to avoid it. This is only the heavenly tribulation simulated by the purple gold luo jade plate. If it were a real heavenly tribulation, what would I do?" As he spoke, Li Yundong couldn't help but smile bitterly and say, "I was too arrogant." Zi Yuan couldn't help showing anger on her face and shouted, "You've traveled 100 miles. The heavenly tribulation is coming soon. How can you give up at the last moment?" Li Yunyang shook his head in pain and said, "You don't know. When the last heavenly thunder came, the whole spirit space was filled with heavenly thunder. It was so dense that every inch of land was struck by heavenly thunder. How could I hide? It's impossible to avoid it." Zi Yuan still wanted to say something, but she stopped when the words reached her mouth. In fact, deep in her heart, she had never believed that Li Yundong could survive the heavenly tribulation. For thousands of years, only great cultivators who had cultivated to the immortal Jinshan phase were qualified to challenge the power of heaven and face the heavenly thunder. The immortal Jinshan phase was the highest phase of the seventh heaven. Since ancient times, few people had been able to cultivate to this phase. As for the cultivators who could survive the heavenly tribulation of the eighth heaven, without exception, they had all become immortals. In today's world, there was no one who could survive the heavenly tribulation and stay in the mortal world. Li Yundong had just begun to cultivate the Shentong of the fifth heaven. Although the high-intensity intensive cultivation in the past few days had improved his strength a lot, he had only improved from the primary phase of the Shentong to the intermediate phase. There was still a long way to go before he reached the advanced phase, not to mention the Yuanying phase of the sixth heaven and the Jinshan phase of the seventh heaven. There were 2 whole realms in between. How could he survive the heavenly tribulation? The heavenly tribulation was the most terrible tribulation for cultivators. There was nothing more difficult to deal with in the world than the heavenly tribulation. It was like asking a student who had not graduated from high school to do atomic bomb research. How could he possibly succeed? Thinking of this, Zi Yuan couldn't help but lose control of her Taoist heart. She couldn't help thinking, it's impossible. If he can't survive the heavenly tribulation, he will be killed by the heavenly thunder. If he dies, won't Master's psalm become a joke? Then what about my cultivation? Master said that my cultivation should be based on this poem, on the boy in front of me. Could it be that Master was wrong? Impossible, this is absolutely impossible. As soon as this thought flashed through Zi Yuan's mind, she immediately denied it. She thought to herself, Master has always been right. It's impossible for him to be wrong. But how can he survive the heavenly tribulation? Zi Yuan felt an unprecedented panic. She looked at Li Yundong anxiously, as if hoping for a miracle to happen to him. At this time, Li Yundong also slowly recovered from the fear of the heavenly thunder. He looked at the distant sky outside the balcony and suddenly said, "The heavenly tribulation is coming." As soon as he finished speaking, he heard a loud bang in the sky. It could be said that there was a thunderbolt in the clear sky, causing the surrounding air to tremble violently. Then, countless dark clouds rolled over from the horizon, like an overwhelming tide. After a while, the dark clouds covered the sky and the earth, shrouding the entire Tiannan city. It really gave people a terrifying feeling of dark clouds pressing down on the city. After all, the simulated heavenly thunder in the spirit space was not as good as the real one. Li Yundong only felt as if there was a pair of incomparably majestic eyes staring at him in the sky. The air around him seemed to have become stagnant, as if countless invisible filaments were dragging his body, making it much heavier. Li Yundong took a deep breath and chuckled. He looked at the rolling dark clouds in the sky with an incomparably complicated look in his eyes. If it's a blessing, it's not a curse. If it's a curse, it can't be avoided. In the end, I can't avoid this knife. Let's go. Don't go through the heavenly tribulation here. Otherwise, you will be implicated. He turned to Ziyuan and said, "You don't have to go. Help me take a message to Su Chan and tell her." As he said this, a gentle look appeared on Li Yundong's face. The happiest days of my life were the days when I was with her. Although the time was very short, I feel that my life was very worthwhile. After that, Li Yundong turned and walked out of the door. Ziyuan stared at his back blankly. For a moment, her heart was surging, and her thoughts were complicated. She couldn't help muttering to herself, "What should I do? What should I do?" There was another loud rumble in the sky. Countless bolts of lightning rolled and flowed in the thick layers of dark clouds, like thousands of floodwaters accumulating in a dam. They were only waiting for the moment the floodgates were opened to release the floodwaters. Then, they would gush out and destroy their target in an instant. == 3 o'clock tomorrow. Chapter 253. Go to watch net. Li Yundong left the gate of Hongsheng New area and went straight to the suburbs. After running for more than 20 miles, the high-rise buildings gradually disappeared around him. Li Yundong followed the road to a sparsely populated place in the suburbs before he stopped. Go to watch net. 7 km. Not long after he stopped, he saw Ziyuan rushing over from behind him. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment, then smiled and said, "What are you doing here? Are you here to help me collect my corpse?" Ziyuan had followed him subconsciously. Even she didn't know what she was going to do. She was stunned for a moment and didn't answer. Li Yundong smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "There's no need to collect the corpse. Didn't you see that young master? He was smashed to pieces last time. His body and soul were destroyed. Even if you wanted to collect the corpse, you couldn't. It was all chopped clean. By the way, the heavenly tribulation is quite environmentally friendly and low carbon. Alas, it's a pity that I didn't buy insurance for myself in advance. Otherwise, I would have made a lot of money." Listening to Li Yundong's nagging, Ziyuan felt strange in her heart. She wanted to laugh, but she couldn't. She couldn't help asking, "The heavenly tribulation is coming soon. Aren't you afraid?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "At first, I was very afraid, but it's useless to be afraid. Anyway, I'll die if I stick my head out, and I'll die if I shrink my head. I might as well die more naturally." After that, he told Ziyuan like a talkative old woman, "I say, fairy sister, you are beautiful, but you lack a little bit of humanity. In the future, you won't be able to find a boyfriend." "What, you don't want to find a boyfriend? Are you going to be alone for the rest of your life? Isn't that a waste of God's gifts? Hey, you're not really going to find a man for the rest of your life, are you? Are you really not going to find one? Forget it, I won't force it. Anyway, I'm going to be taken away by the heavenly tribulation soon. It's not my turn to have such a good thing." Ziyuan stared blankly at Li Yundong. When she heard the last sentence, she couldn't help but think of what her master had said. She asked, "Do you like me?" Li Yundong was stunned, then he laughed and said, "I was just saying it casually. Don't take it seriously." Ziyuan was choked by Li Yundong. She looked at the boy in front of her, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. Watch net. 7 km. Of course, although I already have Su Chan, I think you're still very good. Look at you, you're so beautiful, and you're so good at running a family. You're really the perfect wife and mother in the eyes of all men in the world. Hey, are you sure you want to stay single for the rest of your life? Hey, don't be the only one talking. You should say something too. I say, fairy sister, why don't you say something? Zi Yuan had been quietly listening to Li Yundong's nagging. Her face was the same as usual, but her heart was in a mess, and she couldn't sort it out no matter how hard she tried. Li Yundong muttered to himself for a while. Seeing that Zi Yuan was ignoring him, he suddenly pointed to the sky and cursed, F***ck God, I just killed a guy who is worse than a beast. Why do you want to kill me? F***ck, you blind thing, why don't you go to hell? In this world, good people are going to be struck by lightning, and bad people are getting away with it. What the F***ck are you doing? Li Yundong cursed loudly. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning fell from the sky and struck a mountain ridge in the distance. Li Yundong was stunned for a moment and then burst out laughing. Look carefully before you strike again. I'm right here. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong in a daze. She suddenly asked, Li Yundong, if I let you go back to the past, would you still use heavenly thunder to kill young Master He? Li Yundong was stunned. He didn't notice the subtext of Zi Yuan's words. He just sneered and said without hesitation, the one thing I don't regret the most in my life is to attract heavenly thunder to kill young Master He. If God gives me another chance, I hope I can kill him 10,000 times. Zi Yuan sighed heavily in her heart. She looked at Li Yundong with a complicated look in her eyes. For a moment, she didn't know what words to use to describe this boy. Li Yundong saw that Zi Yuan's expression was solemn, so he smiled and advised, you'd better leave quickly. It won't be good if you get implicated when the heavenly thunder strikes. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong and asked, you really don't regret it? Think about Su Chan. You won't be able to see her again. Won't you be sad? Li Yundong snorted and said, what's there to regret about this kind of thing? As a man, there are things that he can do and things that he can't. There are some things that I have to do even if I have to climb a mountain of knives and go down a sea of fire. But there are some things that I won't do even if there's a beautiful woman in front of me. As he spoke, he thought of Su Chan, and his expression softened. He sighed softly and said, it's just that I can't bear to part with my little girl. I just don't know if she can take good care of herself if I'm not around. When Li Yundong talked about Su Chan, he couldn't stop talking for a while. He kept talking to Zi Yuan about the little things that had happened between him and Su Chan, completely ignoring the fact that the dark clouds above their heads were getting denser and denser, and the number of lightning flashing in the clouds was getting more and more frequent. Go to the internet. 7 KOM. When he talked about the time when Su Chan's hand touched the electric switch of the socket, Li Yundong suddenly laughed. He said to Zi Yuan, by the way, didn't you want to know what it feels like to be roused? As he said this, he reached out to Zi Yuan. Zi Yuan looked at Li Yundong's outstretched hand and asked in confusion, what are you doing? Li Yundong winked at her and said, hold my hand. When the thunder strikes down later, you will know what it feels like to be roused. No matter how heavy Zi Yuan's mood was, she couldn't help but burst into laughter when she heard Li Yundong's witty words. She shook her head, sighed, and said, why are you still not serious at this time? Li Yundong said, you don't want to give me your hand? Well, you can only experience what it feels like to be roused in the future. After that, Li Yundong urged Zi Yuan, the thunder is coming soon. Hurry up and go. It's better for one to die than two. You are so beautiful. It would be a pity if you died with me. However, Zi Yuan just stood there and looked at Li Yundong with a frown. No matter how much Li Yundong tried to persuade her, she didn't move at all. She just looked at Li Yundong blankly. Li Yundong couldn't help but say angrily, hey, what are you doing? Do you want to die with me? Seeing that Zi Yuan was still motionless, he couldn't help but curse, hey, are you deaf or dumb? Go, What are you staying here for? Have you fallen in love with me and wanted to die with me? Idiot, get out of here. I'm annoyed when I see your dead face. Get out of here. If you don't go, I'll. Before he could finish his words, there was a sudden loud bang in the sky. Li Yundong's hair suddenly stood on end. With a tap of his feet, he instantly floated dozens of meters away. As soon as he landed, a bolt of heavenly thunder suddenly struck him heavily. After all, the heavenly thunder simulated by the purple gold jade plate could not be compared with the power of the real heavenly thunder. What's more, the main purpose of the former was to let Li Yundong continuously absorb the power of the heavenly thunder while dodging it, while the latter used the power of heaven and earth to kill Li Yundong. This time, the heavenly thunder was extremely fierce, and the world was suddenly illuminated by lightning. Li Yundong only felt that an unstoppable force of heaven's might was falling straight down from the top of his head. The power and speed of this thunder was far greater than that of the heavenly thunder in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate. As soon as Li Yundong moved, the heavenly thunder struck where he had been. Although he dodged it, it still brushed past his body. Li Yundong suddenly felt that half of his body was numb, and he was completely out of control. The powerful and terrifying power of heavenly thunder began to rampage along the meridians in his body, like a wild beast. Li Yundong's heart suddenly shook. He knew that it was impossible for him to survive the thunder retribution with his own strength, but he hadn't expected that just the first bolt of thunder, which had only brushed past his body, would make him unable to move. When Ziyuan, who was not far away, saw Li Yundong fall, her heart suddenly trembled. There seemed to be a voice in her mind shouting, "He is going to die. Isn't Master's psalm wrong? If he dies, what should I do?" Ziyuan had lived under her master's protection all her life. She couldn't imagine what it would be like if the things she had deeply rooted in the past were completely overturned. Impossible, Master can't be wrong. He won't die. A thought suddenly flashed through Ziyuan's mind. She subconsciously flew over, holding the purple gold jade plate in her palm, and held it up to the sky. The purple gold jade plate rotated quickly, emitting bursts of golden light. This golden light was like a tide, instantly swallowing her and Li Yundong's figures. At the instant they disappeared, a bolt of lightning suddenly fell from the sky and heavily struck the purple gold luo jade plate. The purple gold luo jade plate trembled violently, and the golden light it released became much brighter. Li Yundong only felt that his eyes were bright, and when he opened them, he was blind. He subconsciously closed his eyes, and when he opened them again, he found that he was already in the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate. At this time, although the power of thunder in his body was going crazy, he still suppressed his chaotic qi and asked, "What are you doing here?" Ziyuan had suddenly intervened to help Li Yundong get through the heavenly tribulation. She didn't know whether he could get through it or not. If he could, it would be fine. If he couldn't, both of them would be finished. At the moment of life and death, even though Ziyuan was calm and composed, her forehead couldn't help being covered with sweat. She said to Li Yundong in a low voice, "Take care of your injuries and don't worry about anything else." Li Yundong looked at Ziyuan with a complicated look in his eyes. In the end, he closed his eyes and began to mobilize the qi in his body to fight against the power of thunder. The wonder of the purple gold sifting jade plate was that not only could it capture the other party's spirit qi and create a simulated human body in the minor thousand world, it could also directly capture the other party's entire body into its own minor thousand world. At this time, Li Yundong and Ziyuan were both hiding in the purple gold jade plate. The heavenly thunder outside could only break the purple gold jade plate first, and then it could kill Li Yundong and Ziyuan. After watching Li Yundong sit cross-legged and meditate, Ziyuan raised her head worriedly and looked at the situation of the spirit space around her. Every time a bolt of heavenly thunder fell from the outside world and struck the purple gold jade plate, the spirit space would shake violently, and the earth would shake. Ziyuan's heart would tremble involuntarily. She didn't know whether the purple gold jade plate could withstand it, or how many times it could withstand it. The heavenly thunder struck down one after another, and the spirit space trembled with it. Gradually, Ziyuan found that cracks began to appear in the sky of the spirit space, and the green trees in the mountains began to wither in large swathes. Every time the world shook, there would be mountains collapsing and the earth cracking. Oh no, the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate is beginning to collapse. Ziyuan was shocked. Chapter 254. Go to watch net. Although the purple gold jade plate was the most precious treasure of the Linggong sect of the Zhengyi school and was a rare top-grade magic item in the world, the power of this magic item was not comparable to the power of heaven. After being struck by dozens of heavenly thunderbolts from the outside world, it finally stopped rotating slowly, and a crack appeared on the body of the magic item. Watch net. 7 KOM. Ziyuan clenched her fists nervously and concentrated on counting the number of heavenly thunder. At first, every time the heavenly thunder struck down, the world would shake once. She could still count it. But later, the heavenly thunder struck down one after another, almost without any pause. The spirit space was also shaking crazily. How could she still count it? She could only watch as more and more cracks appeared in the sky and the surrounding mountains collapsed. The situation was just like the movie 2012, it was like the end of the world. At this time, Li Yundong was in meditation, busy fighting with the power of thunder in his body, so he didn't notice the situation outside at all. Ziyuan glanced at him and was hesitating whether to wake him up or not. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the spirit space of the purple gold jade plate completely collapsed. In the blink of an eye, Ziyuan and Li Yunyang had also returned from the spirit space to the big wide world. The dark clouds around them were rolling over their heads, and thunder and lightning were intertwining, which was extremely terrifying. Ziyuan looked up and saw that the purple gold luoyu plate had been split in two and was falling from the air. She subconsciously reached out to catch it, only to feel that the purple gold luoyu plate, which was usually full of spiritual qi, was no different from two ordinary stones at this time. One of the three most powerful treasures of the Linggong sect was destroyed in his own hands. This thought suddenly flashed through Ziyuan's mind, but she didn't have time to think about it. She saw the rolling dark clouds in the sky begin to condense. This scene was exactly the same as the last lightning strike Li Yundong had encountered in the spirit space before. The sky was brewing the last powerful blow. Ziyuan looked down at Li Yunyang, and then at the broken purple gold luo jade plate in her hand. She gritted her teeth and shouted. With a flip of her wrist, she suddenly held a mirror above her head. The mirror emitted a colorful light, and in the blink of an eye, it flew to a height of 3 meters above Ziyuan's head. It became bigger and bigger, and after a while, it completely covered her and Li Yundong's position. This was one of the three most powerful magical treasures of the Linggong sect, the celestial glaze mirror. It could see things from thousands of miles away and reflect all the spells in the world. 2 seconds after Ziyuan took out the glass mirror of heaven, countless thunder and lightning fell from the sky. In an instant it was like plowing the ground, and everything within a radius of about a mile around them was struck. Although they were far away from the place where the thunder retribution had taken place, the citizens of Tiannan City still felt a loud crack in the sky, as if the sky had suddenly split open. The originally dark surroundings suddenly shone brightly, as if 9 suns had jumped out of the sky, shining so brightly that no place on the ground could be covered by the shadows. Although the heavenly lightning could not strike their heads, at this moment, all of them felt a chill run down their spines. Countless children and girls were frightened by this earth-shattering lightning and burst into tears. Watch net. 7 KOM. Even the snakes and insects that usually hid in the shadows of the cracks in the ground fled crazily. The cultivators of various sects in the distant Mount Tianlong looked in the direction of the thunder retribution with solemn faces and whispered to each other. This is the last heavenly thunder. I don't know if the person who is going through the thunder retribution can survive it. Humph, are you a rookie who has just started cultivating? How can there be a thunder retribution in autumn? Isn't it courting death to go through the thunder retribution in autumn? Senior brother, why can't we go through the thunder retribution in autumn? Humph, seeing how sincere you are in calling me senior brother, I, your senior brother, will sell you a favor today. Listen carefully. Among the 4 seasons, the spring thunder is the most powerful, but all things grow in spring and are the most vibrant. Although the heavenly thunder is fierce, it hides vitality. The power of the heavenly thunder can be used by cultivators. Therefore, all cultivators go through the thunder retribution in spring without exception. Autumn is the season when all things begin to wither. The heavenly thunder is the most murderous and lifeless. Going through the thunder retribution at this time can be said to be a death sentence. Then why does this person want to go through the thunder retribution in autumn? Humph, how do I know? Maybe some cultivator violated the law of heaven and triggered the thunder retribution? The cultivators in the distant Mount Tianlong could still feel the terrible pressure of the thunder retribution. Zi Yuan, who was in the center of the heavenly thunder, was even more frightened by the pressure. Her whole body was numb, and she couldn't even move her fingers. If it weren't for the protection of the glass mirror of heaven above her head, she would have been destroyed in the blink of an eye. The countless thunderbolts suddenly struck down, and the surface of the glass mirror of heaven instantly bounced the lightning back. The lightning scattered in all directions. Some flew straight into the sky, some flew to other places, and some flew into the forest and hit trees, causing a big fire. Zi Yuan only felt that there was a sudden bright light around her, and then the sky quickly dimmed again. Then, a pair of majestic eyes appeared in the rolling dark clouds in the sky, as if they were staring at them unwillingly. It took a long time for them to slowly dissipate. Go to see the net. 7 KOM. Slowly, the rolling dark clouds in the sky dissipated, and the world returned to normal brightness. Zi Yuan watched the sky-reaching glass mirror slowly fall in front of her. She stretched out her hand and caught it. At a glance, she saw that the mirror was full of cracks. Obviously, such a magical item had been destroyed under the most powerful bombardment of the heavenly thunder. The celestial glaze mirror, one of the 3 most powerful magic treasures of the Linggong sect, was also destroyed by me. Zi Yuan suddenly felt a sharp pain in her heart, and she almost shed tears. In order to help Li Yundong get through the heavenly tribulation, she had destroyed 2 powerful magical treasures of the sect in the blink of an eye. Is all this worth it? Such a thought suddenly came to Zi Yuan's mind, but soon, she thought of the psalm that her master had left for her. Once the Jindan appears, the mortal world's fate is set. Only when thunder rumbles can one see the truth. The spiritual mirror is easy to break, and the immortal sword can't break the red rope. Zi Yuan held the broken celestial glaze mirror, and tears suddenly fell. Drop by drop, they fell on the mirror. She couldn't help choking and saying, "Master, what you said is right. Your psalm is not wrong. But what if I don't save him? Doesn't that prove that what Master said is wrong?" Zi Yuan couldn't help but think of her master stroking her head and sighing. "Zi Yuan, you don't need to know why. You only need to know that this is your fate." Zi Yuan sobbed for a while. In the end, she put away the broken celestial glaze mirror and the broken purple gold luo jade plate. She wiped her tears gently, put her hand on Li Yundong's shoulder, and flew him back to their home in Hongsheng New area. Not long after they returned home, Ziyuan saw Wan Hongling suddenly rush in from the balcony. As soon as she entered the room, she shouted, "Sister Ziyuan! Sister Ziyuan!" Ziyuan came out of the inner room, forced a smile, and said, "You're back." Wan Hongling was careless and didn't notice the change in Ziyuan's expression. She asked loudly, "Has the heavenly tribulation passed? What about Li Yundong? Has he passed the heavenly tribulation?" Ziyuan forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, he has passed it." Wan Hongling suddenly opened her mouth wide and said in surprise, "He really passed it? Is he that powerful? I thought he would die for sure." She took Ziyuan's hands excitedly and kept urging, "Where is he? Take me to see him." Ziyuan forced a smile and said, "He's meditating. Don't disturb him." At this time, Wan Hongling finally realized that something was wrong with Ziyuan. She saw that although there was joy on her Shiji's face, there was more confusion and sadness. She couldn't help but ask, "Sister Ziyuan, what's wrong? What happened?" Ziyuan lowered her head and didn't say anything, and the expression on her face became even more sad. Wan Hongling had never seen Ziyuan like this. As soon as she saw it, she became anxious and stamped her feet. "Sister Ziyuan, what happened? Say something." Ziyuan also knew that this kind of thing couldn't be hidden. She sighed softly and took out the purple gold jade plate that had been split in half from her arms. When Wan Hongling saw that the purple gold luo jade plate had been broken into 2 pieces, her eyes widened and her whole body trembled. But before she could speak, she saw Ziyuan take out the sky glaze mirror again. Unexpectedly, the mirror was also full of cracks. This shock was no small matter. Wan Hongling was horrified and cried out involuntarily, "What's going on?" Although she was impatient, she was not a fool. After thinking about it, she understood the key points. Wan Hongling grabbed Ziyuan's arm and said loudly, "Sister Ziyuan, in order to help him pass the heavenly tribulation, you destroyed the 2 most powerful magical weapons of our Linggong sect. Are you crazy? Is he worth it?" At this time, Ziyuan calmed down. She took a deep breath and sighed softly. "This is also my fate. There's no way to avoid it." Wan Hongling was flustered and anxious. She said loudly, "Our Linggong sect has always been looked down upon. Now that 2 of the 3 most powerful magical weapons have been destroyed, we will be looked down upon even more. Sister Ziyuan, you can stand those people bullying you, but I can't. Will there still be a place for us to stay in Mount Longhu in the future?" Ziyuan closed her eyes and didn't say a word. After a long time, she slowly opened her eyes and said, "Hongling, people slander me, bully me, humiliate me, laugh at me, belittle me, despise me, hate me, and lie to me. What do you think I should do?" This sentence came from Mount Hanshan, and it was a famous dialogue. Wan Hongling had been reading poetry since she was a child. How could she not know that the next sentence was, "Just bear with him, let him, avoid him, bear with him, respect him, ignore him, and wait for a few more years to see him." But knowing it and being able to do it were 2 different things. Wan Hongling said with tears in her eyes, "Sister Ziyuan, why are you always like this? You would rather suffer yourself than suffer others?" Ziyuan smiled slightly. "This is the way that Master pointed out to me. You don't understand, Hongling. When you understand it one day, you will understand." As she spoke, she seemed to be unwilling to dwell on this topic any longer. She changed the subject and asked, "Have you settled the spirits of the 2 sisters?" Wan Hongling wiped her tears and nodded. But she soon remembered something and told her about how Zhang Tianhe had invited them to help attack the Fox Zen school. Then, she asked, "Sister Ziyuan, do you think we should go and help?" Ziyuan pondered for a while before saying, it's good to go and have a look. Let's see what's going on. By the way, Li Yunyang is cultivating qi now. Let's not disturb him. You can leave a note telling him what happened at the Fox Zen school and then tell him the location. When the time comes, he will naturally be able to find it himself. Ruan Hongling pouted and muttered reluctantly, you really think of everything for him. In the end, he doesn't care about you at all. He only has that fox spirit in his heart. Zi Yuan glared at Hongling and shouted, you ask for a reward for everything you do. I think you should be a businessman who stinks of money. What's the point of cultivating? Ruan Hongling retorted, it's good to be a businessman. At least you won't do such a stupid thing. Zi Yuan said angrily, how dare you talk back? Seeing that Zi Yuan was angry, Ruan Hongling didn't dare to say anything more. She just wrote the note and threw it on the tea table in the living room. She said, well, I left it for him. Let's go quickly. Zi Yuan nodded with a sullen face. When she finally left, she subconsciously looked back at Li Yunyang's room. She knew in her heart that when Li Yunyang opened his eyes again, he would find that an incomparably vast cultivation world was truly open to him. From then on, his cultivation would be limitless. As the saying goes, the sea is wide and the fish can jump, the sky is high and the birds can fly. I wonder how far he will go in the future. Zi Yuan sighed softly in her heart. Then, she and Ruan Hongling turned into two beams of green light and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Not long after they left, a gust of wind blew in from outside, causing the note on the coffee table to fall to the ground. Chapter 255. Go to watch net. Not long after Zi Yuan left, Li Yundong's battle with heavenly thunder in his body reached a critical stage. Go to watch net. If it had been an ordinary person, even if they had been touched by heavenly thunder, they would have been scared out of their wits. Even if their bodies were still there, the 3 souls and 7 spirits in their bodies would have been killed by heavenly thunder. However, Li Yundong's Naiden had been built on the peak of the Himalayas. It had been tempered by the power of heavenly thunder. Moreover, he had been reborn from the Jindan, so his body was far stronger than that of ordinary people. In addition, he had fought with heavenly thunder countless times in the spirit space and been struck by it countless times. He had long had a certain degree of resistance, so he had not been directly killed by heavenly thunder. Although this heavenly thunder was rampaging in Li Yundong's body, when he no longer cared about it and began to concentrate on mobilizing his Jinqi to fight against it, its good days came to an end. Although the power of heavenly thunder was tyrannical, it was a guest army after all. As the saying goes, a strong dragon cannot suppress a local snake. In the beginning, the fierceness of this heavenly thunder could be said to be broken wherever it pointed. Li Yundong's Jinqi almost collapsed at the first touch, and he was no match for it at all. However, after Li Yundong found that it was useless in the beginning, he simply opened up all his meridians and let it rush all the way into the lower dantian in his lower abdomen. The lower dantian was the main place where the human body stored qi. As soon as the power of heavenly thunder broke in, Li Yundong felt as if a flood dragon had entered his abdomen and was overturning the rivers and seas. The pain almost made him faint. However, his will had been tempered into steel during his trip to Tibet. He had been defeated by heavenly thunder countless times in the spirit space and had faced it countless times. Naturally, mortals could not compare to him. With great perseverance, Li Yundong began to fight with the power of heavenly thunder in the lower dantian of his lower abdomen. All the qi and blood in his body rushed to the lower dantian crazily. The power of heavenly thunder seemed to have fallen into the vast sea of the people's war. At first, it could still struggle for a while, but later, it was weak. Li Yundong's powerful 5 internal organs were continuously providing the 5 qis, and the Naiden in his lower abdomen was continuously releasing Jinqi. Gradually, the power of the heavenly thunder was subdued by Li Yundong. After an unknown period of time, the extra power of heavenly thunder in Li Yundong's body finally stopped resisting. It went wherever Li Yundong told it to go. It was obedient and flexible, as if it was his own arm. After running his qi for a while and recovering the Jinqi in his body, he suddenly jumped up, exhaled a long breath, and opened his eyes. When Li Yundong opened his eyes again, he found himself in his bedroom. He was stunned for a moment and whispered in disbelief, "I'm not dead? I passed the heavenly tribulation?" Suddenly, a great burst of joy drowned Li Yundong's heart. He shouted ecstatically, "I'm not dead." Before he rushed out of the room, he shouted, "Ziyuan, where are you? Did you save me?" As soon as he rushed out of the bedroom, he suddenly heard his cell phone ringing. Li Yundong looked around and found that his cell phone was lying on the sofa, ringing. He picked up the phone and heard Feng Na's anxious and frightened voice. Hello, Li Yundong. Thank God, I finally got through. Where are you? Come to school quickly. Something happened." Li Yundong was stunned. What happened? Feng Na's voice became a little vague on the phone, and he couldn't hear her clearly. After a while, she just hung up. Go to the internet. Li Yundong was confused, but he knew that something big must have happened to the school. He didn't dare to stay, and he ran to the school without taking the fan of 7 treasures. Although the heavenly tribulation had passed, it was evening, and the sky was already a little bright. Li Yundong didn't dare to fly in the sky, so he just ran all the way to the school. His legs were strong and his speed was extremely fast, no slower than a car. He arrived at the school in less than 20 minutes. As soon as he arrived at the school gate, he saw Feng Na coming up to him with an anxious face. Li Yundong asked in a low voice, "What happened?" Feng Na said, "I saw Zhou Qin go up to the roof of the school building alone after school this afternoon. She didn't come down after she went up. When I went to check, I found that the door on the roof was locked. I called her, but she didn't respond. I called her, but she didn't answer. Just now, she was sitting on the edge of the school building. No matter how I called her, she ignored me. I was so afraid that she would do something impulsive." Li Yundong was shocked when he heard this. He rushed into the school, shouting as he ran, "What's wrong with her? Her foot has finally recovered. Is she crazy?" Feng Na followed him and said anxiously, "I don't know either. I'm so worried." Li Yundong asked, "How did she get on the roof? Why hasn't she learned her lesson after what happened last time? Isn't the roof locked?" Feng Na smiled bitterly. "How would I know?" Li Yundong said angrily, "What are the school leaders doing?" As Li Yundong spoke, he rushed to the teaching building, which was the building where the shooting had happened last time. Zhou Qin was standing on the edge of the teaching building, and even her position was exactly the same. At this time, there were many students gathered under the teaching building, pointing at Zhou Qin. Zhou Qin, who was standing on the top of the teaching building, looked ahead. She didn't notice the situation below at all. Go to see the net. 7 KOM. In her world, she didn't care at all what these people said down there. She only cared about one person, and that was Li Yundong. 113 Shui 4 net. After Li Yundong cured her injury and was picked up by Ziyuan, Zhou Qin dressed up and went to school the next day. She wanted to give Li Yundong a surprise, but she found that Li Yundong did not come to school. The students in the class saw Zhou Qin. Although they didn't know what had happened to this beautiful girl, they still warmly welcomed her back. Zhou Qin didn't feel the slightest warmth in the welcome of her classmates, because in her opinion, the whole world's welcome was not as good as Li Yundong's warm words. On the first day, Zhou Qin couldn't find Li Yundong. She called him on the phone, but no one answered. She suddenly panicked. Is he really going to ignore me after curing my injury? Thinking of this, Zhou Qin's heart suddenly sank. She immediately comforted herself and thought, no, Li Yundong won't ignore me like this. But on the second day, Zhou Qin still didn't see Li Yundong. On the third day, the fourth day, until the seventh day, Zhou Qin still didn't see Li Yundong. After suffering for a few days, she had lost a lot of weight. Her heart was close to despair, and she was restless and floating. In her mind, there was always a question: if my leg hadn't recovered, would he have left me? Thinking of this, Zhou Qin couldn't extricate herself as if she had taken drugs. She went all the way to the rooftop of the school building in a daze and stood at the place where Li Yundong had picked her up in the past. She stood there in a daze. Maybe, if I'm still paralyzed in bed and my leg hasn't recovered, he won't leave me, right? Zhou Qin murmured. She was in a trance and her body was on the verge of collapse. When the students below saw her like this, they immediately exclaimed. Zhou Qin only heard an anxious shout coming from below. The voice was so familiar. She was stunned and looked down, only to see Li Yundong rushing toward her anxiously and angrily. Zhou Qin was ecstatic and subconsciously took a step forward. This time, her body tilted and she fell from the rooftop. A strong sense of weightlessness engulfed her like a tide. But soon, Zhou Qin suddenly felt her body sink. A strong arm held her in its arms, and a strong masculine smell rushed toward her. Zhou Qin felt a burst of light, and her body flew back to the rooftop. She fixed her eyes and saw Li Yundong holding her, his face full of anger. The moment Li Yundong saw Zhou Qin jump down, he was so shocked that his hair stood on end. Without thinking, he immediately rushed up along the wall. He could catch Zhou Qin before he reached the Zhuji phase, and now that he had passed the divine tribulation, there was no need to talk about it. After Li Yundong caught Zhou Qin, he immediately cursed and said angrily, "Are you crazy? It's not easy for you to get well, and now you want to jump off a building. Don't you know how to cherish your life?" Zhou Qin looked at Li Yundong in a daze, as if she couldn't believe that he would appear at this time. Zhou Qin reached out and tentatively touched Li Yundong's cheek, saying in a trembling voice, "Li Yundong, is it really you?" Li Yundong slapped her hand away and said angrily, "Nonsense, if it weren't for me, you would have fallen to your death now. Do you think you will be as lucky as last time? What would you have done if I hadn't come this time? What would you have done if your head had hit the ground this time?" Zhou Qin listened to Li Yundong's scolding. She bit her lip and didn't say anything with tears in her eyes. After Li Yundong scolded her angrily for a while, his anger subsided a little. He said, "What's wrong with you? Why do you want to jump off a building?" Zhou Qin suddenly burst into tears. She held Li Yundong's waist tightly with both hands and said loudly, "Why did you cure me? Why did you catch me? I hate you so much." Li Yundong's next words of complaint were suddenly stuck in his throat. He opened his arms, not knowing whether to hold the girl or what to do. His body froze and he said helplessly, "What's wrong with you? What's wrong with you?" Zhou Qin didn't say anything. She just kept crying. This was the first time in her life that she had cried so loudly. Her voice was sad, like a cuckoo crying blood, which made people feel sorry for her. Li Yundong was not a fool. At first, he didn't react, but when he came to his senses, how could he not understand what the girl was thinking? He let out a long sigh, reached out to stroke her long hair, and said softly, "No matter what, don't make life difficult for yourself." Zhou Qin cried for a long time. When she was tired, she raised her head with tears in her eyes and asked, "Do you love me?" Li Yundong shook his head. Zhou Qin bit her lip and said, "Do you like me? Even if it was in the past, even a little?" Li Yundong thought for a moment, sighed, and nodded gently. Zhou Qin's eyes suddenly flashed with joy. Seeing that Li Yundong was about to speak, she immediately pressed her hand against his lips and said anxiously, "Don't say it. Listen to me." As she spoke, she took a deep breath and gradually calmed down. Zhou Qin said softly, "I know that you love Su Chan, and I don't want to separate you from her. I only ask you one thing. If you don't promise me, I will immediately die in front of you and never cause you any trouble again." Li Yundong knew that this woman was as fierce as fire, and her words were true. He smiled bitterly and said, "Tell me, what's the matter?" Zhou Qin said, "I know that you are not an ordinary person. Like Zi Yuan, you are a mysterious cultivator. Can you promise me that you will accept me as your disciple?" Li Yundong had originally planned to teach Zhou Qin the magic of cultivation, but teaching her cultivation did not mean that he would accept her as a disciple. Especially after he accepted her as a disciple, wouldn't they be together all day long? How could there be no problems? Li Yundong hesitated in his heart and pondered, but Zhou Qin couldn't help crying and said, "I just want to see you a few more times every day and talk to you a few more times. Can't I do that?" As the saying goes, the most difficult thing to bear is the kindness of a beauty. Thinking of what this girl had done for him, Li Yundong couldn't help but sigh and say, "Well, then I will accept you as my disciple. But you must remember what you said today, and in the future, you must not commit suicide at will. Do you understand?" Zhou Qin wiped away her tears, and her face gradually calmed down. She became the calm, proud, and conceited princess again. She stood up, put her palms together respectfully, and said to Li Yundong, "Yes, master." Li Yundong was not used to the change of Zhou Qin's role, and he couldn't adapt to the fact that the girl who had just been crying in his arms had become a respectful student in the blink of an eye. He smiled bitterly and joked, "I'm a Taoist, not a Buddhist disciple." However, there was no smile on Zhou Qin's face. Her face was calm, and she made a palm with one hand. She bowed and said, "Yes, master." Li Yundong's heart trembled when he saw her like this. He knew that after the girl had briefly opened her inner world, she had wrapped herself up tightly again. Li Yundong looked at Zhou Qin and didn't know what to say for a moment. He sighed and shook his head. "Forget it. Don't do such stupid things in the future." He took Zhou Qin downstairs, only to see the students around them pointing fingers at them. He didn't think too much about it. After comforting Zhou Qin with a few words, he sent her home, and then he went home alone. After returning home, Li Yundong leaned against the door alone and was in a daze for a long time. When he came to his senses and wanted to cook, he suddenly saw a white note on the ground. He had been in a hurry to go out and hadn't had time to look at it. Now that he saw it, he picked it up. Li Yundong suddenly flew into a rage. "Are these guys tired of living? It's fine if you besiege the Fox Zen school, but if you hurt my girl, I'll kill you." After that, he didn't even eat. He immediately carried the fan of 7 treasures on his back and rushed to Mount Tianlong/OM/4527894194. Chapter 256. Go to watch net. Li Yundong bought the fastest train ticket and rushed all the way to the vicinity of Mount Tianlong. It was already the next day. Go to watch net. 7 K.O. Hong N.O.M. After getting off the train, when Li Yundong rushed to the vicinity of Mount Tianlong, he found that there were gradually more and more cultivators, who were extremely rare on weekdays. Some of them were wearing Taoist robes, but most of them were wearing ordinary clothes, no different from tourists. At the foot of Mount Tianlong, Li Yundong could see many tourists holding small red flags and the flags of various tourism agencies. The tour guides standing at the front were holding loudspeakers and loudly introducing the surrounding customs to the tourists. These tourists were taking photos and playing. For a moment, the foot of the mountain was bustling with noise and excitement. Li Yundong was stunned and thought to himself, this doesn't look like the situation of the 6 great sects besieging the Fox Zen school. It doesn't look like a scene of gunpowder at all. Li Yundong was carrying a big iron fan on his back and had an extraordinary bearing. When he stood in the crowd, he really felt like a crane in a flock of chickens. The people around him all looked at him. Especially some cultivators hiding in the crowd, they all looked at Li Yundong with sharp eyes, their eyes very unfriendly. Li Yundong's heart trembled. He also pretended to appreciate the surrounding scenery and looked around, but his feet slowly moved into the surrounding woods step by step. Li Yundong gradually left the crowd of the tourist attraction area at the foot of the mountain. There was already a dense forest around him. He kicked his feet and jumped onto a big tree. His body was hidden in the dense leaves, and he held his breath to hide the aura of his whole body. After a while, 2 people flashed under the tree. Both of them were dressed like ordinary tourists. The taller one asked, "Where is he?" The shorter one looked around and snorted coldly. "He can't have run far." The taller one hesitated for a moment and said, "Don't enter the forest. I don't know whether this person is an enemy or a friend. Let's not chase after him." The shorter one sneered and said, "Now Mount Tianlong is full of people from the 6 sects. Are you afraid of an ambush?" The taller one advised, "After all, this is the territory of the Fox Zen school. As the saying goes, a centipede dies but never falls down. If it's an enemy, it won't be good if we fall into an ambush. Besides, aside from the 6 great system-allocated sects, aren't there people from other sects as well? These people might not have good intentions." The short man snorted and cursed, "These guys are just waiting for a chance to take advantage of us. They're like flies surrounding us." Watch Net. 7 km. Updated at a very fast speed. The taller one smiled and said, "Hey, senior brother, is what you said true?" The short man looked at him and asked, "What is true?" The taller one smiled and said, "Of course it's about the treasure of the Fox Zen school. I heard from my colleagues in other sects that the Fox Zen school has accumulated countless powerful magical weapons and secret manuals for thousands of years. Once we break through the Fox Zen school, won't everyone get a share?" The short man sneered and said, "You wish. Save it, do you think we'll get the real good stuff? Won't it be divided up by those big guys before it's our turn? Didn't you see that the Zhengyi school has sent people here this time? The 6 sects usually have activities. When did these guys come here? Humph, these Zhengyi school people used to be arrogant, but this time they're jealous, aren't they?" The tall man spat on the ground and said, "Damn it, these B***stards usually look dignified, but in fact, they're all thieves and prostitutes." The short man made a gesture and shouted in a low voice, "Shoo, shut up. You're crazy. If the people of the Zhengyi school hear this, I'm afraid that there will be no place for you in the future, no matter how big the world is." The tall man snorted and said, "Although the Zhengyi school is strong, our Donghua sect of the South sect is not to be trifled with." The short man laughed and was about to speak, but suddenly his expression froze. He grabbed the tall man and said, "There's movement. Listen." The tall man listened attentively. Sure enough, he heard faint shouts coming from the distance. His expression suddenly became serious. "Someone is here. Let's go and have a look." The short man also nodded and said, "Okay. Let's go and have a look." As he said this, the 2 of them moved and quickly ran in the direction of the sound. Li Yundong watched them leave and also listened attentively for a while. His cultivation was much higher than that of the 2 of them, so he could hear it more clearly. He could tell that it was the sound of fighting. Li Yundong hesitated for a moment and followed closely. However, while the 2 of them were running on the ground, Li Yundong was flying around the trees like an ape. His internal breath was originally strong. After passing through the heavenly tribulation, he had absorbed some of the power of heavenly thunder, and his strength had soared. Therefore, he followed behind the two of them like a shadow and was unexpectedly not discovered. Let's go to the internet. 7 km. After following them for about a kilometer, Li Yundong suddenly saw a few young people in Taoist robes besieging a bare-chested, extremely burly man. Li Yundong took a closer look and was immediately stunned. He saw that the muscles on the man's upper body were bulging, and his blood vessels were like rolling snakes, twisting and coiling on his body. His whole body exuded a sense of terrifying strength. It was Lin Youfa, who had several grudges with Li Yundong in the past. How could it be him? Li Yundong's heart trembled. There were 4 young people besieging Lin Youfa, 3 men and 1 woman. All of them were holding long swords made of fine steel, with a red sword tassel at the bottom. None of the 4 young people was a match for Lin Youfa in a one-on-one fight, but the 4 of them formed a sword formation, firmly trapping Lin Youfa inside. Li Yundong saw that when 2 of them attacked, the other 2 quickly went behind or from the side of Lin Youfa, constantly harassing him. Once Lin Youfa used his tyrannical strength to force back or defeat the attacks of the 2 people in front of him, the 2 of them immediately launched a strong attack, fiercely attacking the vital parts of Lin Youfa's waist and back. From auxiliary harassment to strong main attack, Lin Youfa was forced to turn around to save himself, and he was unable to go further to kill the 2 people in front of him. Like this, Lin Youfa's body was covered in scars one after another. He was like a lion that was being attacked by 4 wolves in turn, unable to care about its tail. Li Yundong watched from the tree as Lin Youfa was tortured by the 4 young people until he roared again and again. He couldn't help but be shocked. He had fought with Lin Youfa a few times and knew his strength very well. If it was a head-on confrontation, Lin Youfa's strength was extremely terrifying. If it was a one-on-one fight, Lin Youfa could defeat any one of them with one hand. However, these 4 young people relied on such a joint attack sword formation to easily turn Lin Youfa into a trapped beast in a cage, which shocked Li Yundong. If it were me, what would I do? Li Yundong couldn't help but think to himself. Surrounded by the 4 people, Lin Youfa kept roaring loudly, "Despicable people of the Jinshan sect, if you have the ability, come and fight me one-on-one. 4 against 1 is nothing." The woman among the 4 sneered and said, "What are you doing sneaking around in the back mountain? I told you that this is a forbidden area and you can't barge in. You just don't listen. Aren't you courting death?" Lin Youfa said angrily, "You little kids are so unreasonable. Is this your territory? Why can't I come when you can?" The woman sneered and said, "I think you are jealous of the treasure of the Fox Zen School and want a share of it. Humph, I've been following you for a long time. Just now, I saw you suddenly disappear in the back mountain and then suddenly reappear. Tell me honestly, did you find the back door to the secret place of the Fox Zen School?" Lin Youfa said angrily, "If I found it, why would I come out and talk nonsense with you little kids? Are you brainless?" The woman was stunned for a moment, but then she became angry and said, "How dare you talk nonsense?" A man on the side shouted, "Shiji, this person doesn't look like a good person at first glance. Let's go and take him down first." Another man said, "That's right. A small divine fist sect dares to behave atrociously here. They must be tired of living." Lin Youfa was quite powerful in Jiulong, Hong Kong, and he was also a quite old cultivator. Usually, he was very arrogant in Jiulong, but he hadn't expected that after coming to the mainland, he would first be defeated by Li Yundong, and then be bullied by 4 young juniors. How could he swallow this insult? Lin Youfa quickly took out a golden needle from his trouser leg and inserted it into his Baihui acupoint. He shouted, Mao Shan Tru beating Kung Fu, the 8 marshals show their magical powers. As soon as Jiutian Shang Fu, commander of the 5 directions, Generals Wei Yuan of the North Pole, Marshal Tianpeng Zhenjuan, please come to me. As soon as Li Yundong heard this voice, he was immediately shocked. This guy is going all out. Sure enough, Lin Youfa's originally tall and sturdy figure grew a lot in the blink of an eye, turning into a 2-meter-tall Iron Tower King Kong. His skin was dark, and his already exaggerated muscles became even more terrifying, as if he was an armored robot. His appearance caused the 4 of them to suck in a breath of cold air. A hint of fear appeared in their eyes. The 3 men looked at the woman and whispered, "Shiji, do we fight?" The woman looked unwilling. Just as she was about to speak, she heard a shout from the side, "Fellow Taoist of the Jinshan sect, don't panic. Our friends from the Chuanjian Dragon sect are here. We will definitely not let a small sect like the Divine Fist sect get away with it." As he spoke, the tall man and the short man who had been chasing Li Yundong came out of the dense forest. One was holding a horsetail whisk, and the other was holding a long sword. When the 4 people of the Jinshan sect saw the tall man and the short man, they immediately looked happy and said loudly, "It turns out that the Taoist friends of the Chuanjian Dragon sect are nearby. Well, come and help us deal with this devil." Lin Youfa laughed angrily and said, "You uncultured little beasts, relying on the fact that you are from a righteous sect, relying on the fact that your sect is powerful, you run amok. As long as one goes against you, one is a demon, an evildoer. Well, let me see what you can do today." As he said this, he suddenly punched the woman in front of him. As an inner disciple of a prestigious sect, this woman's cultivation was not bad. As soon as Lin Youfa made his move, she sensed that something was wrong and subconsciously dodged to the side. Suddenly, a strong gust of wind swept past and scratched her cheek, causing a wound to appear. Blood flowed out of the wound. As a cultivator, the woman's appearance was not bad. She usually cherished her appearance very much. At this time, when she saw Li Yundong, she immediately became furious and rushed over with a roar. As soon as she moved, the 3 people next to her also rushed over. At this time, Lin Youfa was fighting against 4 people alone, so he was not at a disadvantage. But after a while, the tall man and the short man of the Chuanjian sect also joined the battlefield. One of them was holding a horsetail whisk, and his attacks were soft and pervasive. The end of the horsetail whisk was like a whip, which seemed soft and powerless, but when it hit Lin Youfa's skin and flesh were torn. He let out a roar. As for the short man with a long sword, his sword skills were wide, and his moves were aimed at Lin Youfa's vital parts. For a moment, he and the 4 disciples of the Jinshan sect were the main attackers, while the tall man and the disciples of the Chuanjian Dragon sect were supporting them from the side. After Lin Youfa summoned Marshal Tianpeng, his strength increased again, but his speed decreased a little. Although his ability to resist attacks had become extremely strong, under the siege of the 6 people, he was losing ground. Li Yundong looked at the field and thought to himself, Lin Youfa has strong strength, but he can't hurt his opponent effectively. Under the siege of these 6 people, sooner or later, his flesh will be cut by a blunt knife and he will bleed to death. Although this old man has a grudge against me, these so-called decent sects are too shameless. They actually ganged up on me 6 times. As Li Yundong thought about it, he couldn't help but let out a disdainful snort from his nose. At this time, the tall disciple of the Chuanjian Dragon sect, who was fighting fiercely in the field, suddenly jumped out of the field. His eyes swept toward Li Yundong like lightning, and he shouted, "Who is it? I have a terrible headache. I'm writing until my brain lacks oxygen. /om/45278941954." Chapter 257. Go to watch net. Li Yundong didn't want to intervene in their fight, but the disciples of the 6 sects were used to being arrogant. Now that they had discovered Li Yundong, how could they allow him to leave? Seeing that Li Yundong didn't respond, the tall disciple sneered and said, "Why are you hiding? Come out." After that, he flicked his hand and threw 2 penetrating bone nails in his sleeve at Li Yundong. Go to watch net. 7 KOM. Li Yundong was furious when he saw that the man was so ruthless. He raised his hand and caught the 2 penetrating bone nails between his fingers, then threw them back at him and shouted, "Here you go." The tall disciple was also an inner disciple in the Zhuji phase, so his reaction was extremely fast. He only felt a strong wind blowing on his face and subconsciously lowered his head. He only heard a sound of air breaking above his head, like a sharp arrow shot from a strong bow. The momentum was extremely terrifying. His heart shook violently and he thought to himself, how powerful. Which sect is this senior from? The tall disciple shouted with fear in his heart, which master is stabbing me? Why don't you come out and see me? Li Yundong jumped down with a snort and said coldly, "I don't dare to call myself a master." When the tall disciple saw him, he was shocked and said, "It's you?" Then he said angrily, "I saw that you didn't look like a good person before. I didn't expect you to be in cahoots with the little snakes and rats of the Divine Fist sect." Li Yundong hadn't expected that he would be accused for no reason. He laughed out loud. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly saw the situation in the field change dramatically. Lin Youfa saw that the tall disciple didn't join in the attack, and the others were somewhat distracted by Li Yundong's appearance. He immediately launched an extremely fierce counterattack. The woman in front of him stabbed at him with her sword. Lin Youfa blocked it with his arm, and with a puff, the long sword pierced through his forearm. Lin Youfa took advantage of the fact that the other party didn't have time to retract their swords. He twisted his arm and used 2 of the bones in his forearm to block the other party's swords, preventing them from retracting their swords. Then, he used his other hand to slap the woman's head. The female disciple of the Jinshan sect did not expect Lin Youfa to use his own arm bone to block her long sword. For a moment, she did not react. She tried to pull her sword out twice, but it did not budge. Lin Youfa's palm was already in front of her. She had no choice but to abandon her sword and retreat. Watch net. The other 3 disciples immediately stabbed their swords towards Lin Youfa, forcing him to stop. The shorter disciple from Chuanzhen Dragon sect also swung his horsetail whisk towards Lin Youfa's lower body. How could Lin Youfa let her run away? With a loud shout, he suddenly rushed forward. Without looking at the attacks around him, he slapped the female disciple on the forehead. With a puff, her head almost fell into her chest. At the same time, the 3 swords of the other 3 disciples of the Jinshan sect stabbed into Lin Youfa's body at the same time, and the horsetail whisk of all the disciples of the Zhenlong sect also hit Lin Youfa's lower body. However, at this time, Lin Youfa was possessed by God. His whole body was as hard as steel, and his ability to resist attacks was extremely strong. Only sharp weapons could hurt him, and his lower body was covered with shenqi. Although the horsetail whisk made him feel pain all over his body, he was not seriously injured. With a loud roar, the muscles all over his body suddenly contracted, clamping the long swords of the 3 male disciples of the Jinshan sect in his muscles. Then, he raised his hand and slapped them 3 times, sending them all flying out. He saw that the chests of the 3 people had sunken deeply. After falling to the ground, they spat out a mouthful of blood. It seemed that they would die. He was shocked. This old man is really cruel and merciless. In the blink of an eye, Lin Youfa had killed 4 people in a row. He turned around and grabbed the short disciple of the Zhenlong sect, who was scared out of his wits. He grabbed his head and picked him up like a chicken. The taller disciple of the Qianzhen dragon sect had not expected that in less than 20 seconds after he withdrew from the battle, the whole situation would change dramatically. His junior brother had fallen into Lin Youfa's hands. The taller disciple was shocked and angry. He shouted, "How dare you kill him? Aren't you afraid of the revenge of our Qianzhen dragon sect?" Lin Youfa was covered in blood. He said with a ferocious smile, "I've even killed 4 kids of the Jinshan sect. Why would I be afraid of killing one more from your Qianzhen dragon sect?" As he spoke, he exerted force with his fingers and crushed the short disciple's head like a watermelon. Then, he threw it aside. The taller disciple's expression changed drastically. Without thinking about it, he immediately turned around and fled. Colorful text. Learn, net. Super_speed. More. Go to CNET. 7KOM. New. Seeing that he was about to escape, Lin Youfa shouted at Li Yundong, "Don't let him get away." But Li Yundong was not willing to be his accomplice. He just stood aside, showing that he would not help either side. The taller disciple passed by Li Yundong and disappeared into the dense forest in an instant. Lin Youfa rushed over and looked in the direction in which the taller disciple had fled. He stamped his feet and sighed. He shouted at Li Yundong angrily, "Why didn't you stop him?" Li Yundong had a grudge against Lin Youfa. He had not been afraid of Lin Youfa before he had reached the Zhuji phase. Now that his strength had improved by leaps and bounds, he was even less afraid. He sneered and said, "Why should I stop him? Do I know you that well?" Lin Youfa was stunned, and the anger on his face gradually disappeared. He said in a low voice, "Zhenrenli, do you think that if you let him go, he will remember your kindness? Let me tell you, these disciples of the famous sects are all arrogant. Do you think that you can stay out of it if you don't help either side? Stop joking. In the end, they will definitely blame it on you. If you don't believe me, just wait and see." Li Yundong snorted and said, "So what if I am? Do I need you to teach me how to do things?" Lin Youfa raised his eyebrows and said angrily, "Why don't you know what's good for you?" Li Yundong sneered and said, "What, you want to fight? Okay. But don't blame me for not reminding you that you are no match for me." Lin Youfa was furious. He reached out and pulled out the 3 long swords stuck in his body. Then, he put on a posture and said, "Then we'll know when we fight. Zhenrenli, we haven't really decided the winner in the last few times. Today is a good opportunity." Li Yundong looked at the blood flowing from his body and couldn't help frowning. "Forget it. Even if I win against you like this, it won't be an honorable victory. When you recover, we'll fight again." Lin Youfa was stunned. He sneered and said, "Do I need your sympathy?" Li Yundong glanced at Lin Youfa and said lightly, "In the past, I might not have been a match for you, but now you are far from being a match for me. If you insist on fighting, you will be courting death." As he spoke, he snorted through his nose. This sound had the effect of the mantra Mahamudra, causing the surrounding air to tremble. Lin Youfa felt as if his chest had been hammered by someone, and in an instant, his breathing became a problem. He was shocked. How could this kid make such progress so quickly? At this time, Lin Youfa looked at Li Yundong seriously. At this time, Li Yundong had succeeded in the Zhuji phase and had passed the divine tribulation. He was no longer the ignorant person he had been yesterday. The more he looked at him, the more shocked he became. He couldn't help but say, "It's true that a scholar who has been away for 3 days should be looked at with new eyes. Did you have any fortuitous encounter? How can you make such progress so quickly? Even 1,000 miles a day is not enough to describe your cultivation speed. Did you take some panacea?" Li Yundong glanced at Lin Youfa faintly. At this time, the strong enemy of the past had become vulnerable in his eyes. Li Yundong suddenly had a feeling that he was superior to all living beings. He didn't answer, as if he disdained to answer Lin Youfa's question. He turned around and left. Lin Youfa was unwilling to give up and asked loudly behind him, "Hey, how on earth did you cultivate?" Li Yundong ignored him and walked quickly. Lin Youfa chased after him and said, "I'll pay a lot of money to buy your method, okay?" Li Yundong sneered to himself. Could the hardships he had suffered and the things he had experienced along the way be bought with money? Seeing that Li Yundong was still ignoring him, Lin Youfa suddenly had an idea and shouted, "I know the entrance to the secret place of the Fox Zen School. I'll take you there. How about that?" As soon as Li Yundong heard the Fox Zen School, he was shocked and immediately stopped. Lin Youfa sneered in his heart. "Humph, you're willing to stop as soon as you hear this. What's the difference between you and those hypocrites who covet the treasures of the Fox Zen School?" Lin Youfa was disdainful in his heart, but he continued to strike while the iron was hot. "There are many powerful magical weapons and secret manuals in the secret place. How about we go together and share them equally?" Li Yundong suddenly turned around and sneered, "Do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? Since you know, why don't you go alone? As you said just now, since you have found the entrance to the secret place, why don't you go in to find the treasure yourself? Instead, you come out?" Seeing that Li Yundong was talking to him, Lin Youfa was not in a hurry. He laughed and said, "You'll know why if you come with me." Li Yundong said coldly, "You can go by yourself. Don't get me involved." Then he turned around and was about to leave. Seeing that Li Yundong was about to leave, Lin Youfa couldn't help but get anxious. He said loudly, "What can you do up the mountain now? In addition to the 6 great sects, there are at least a dozen sects of all sizes on the mountain, and there are at least 100 cultivators among them. If you go there, you will die. Moreover, from the foot of the mountain to the mountainside, there are layers of guards. When you fight your way through, you will be exhausted to death. Why don't you follow me to the secret place? Instead, you can get ahead of them without being noticed." These words immediately moved Li Yundong. He couldn't help thinking, "Yes, I'm not familiar with this place and I don't even know the way. If I take the right way, I will definitely have a conflict with these cultivators of the famous sections. I'm not afraid of 1 or 2, but if there are more than a dozen, I will have to run away. It doesn't matter if I run away, but what about the little girl? What if I delay and fail to save her?" Thinking of this, Li Yundong secretly made up his mind. He turned to look at Lin Youfa and asked doubtfully, "Do you really know the shortcut?" Seeing that Li Yundong had relented, Lin Youfa was overjoyed. He said with a smile, "Of course, if I, Lin Youfa, lie, let me strike you with 5 thunders of heaven." Li Yundong snorted. "There's no need for that. If you dare to lie to me, I will strike you to death with thunder myself." Hearing Li Yundong's threat, Lin Youfa sneered in his heart. "What a shameless guy. How old are you? If you can use heavenly thunder, is there any justice in this world? Is there any law?" Although he thought so in his heart, he said, "As a cultivator, should keep my word. Come with me and you will know whether I'm telling the truth or not." As he said this, he looked around and urged, "If you want to make up your mind, hurry up. If you delay for a long time, you will beat the small ones and disturb the big ones. Then, you and I won't be able to escape." Li Yundong thought for a moment and said decisively in a deep voice, "Lead the way." It seems that the 8th place on the top flowers list is a foregone conclusion. There will be 3 updates next week, and it will still be 2, 4, and 6/OM/45278941954. Chapter 258. Go to watch net. When Lin Youfa saw that Li Yundong had agreed, he immediately laughed and took out a small medicine bottle from his trouser pocket. Then, he poured out a little golden powder and rubbed it on his wound. The wound quickly healed by itself, and then he pulled out the golden needle from the top of his head. Go to watch net. After a while, Lin Youfa's bones crackled, and he shrank into a shriveled old man again. Li Yundong looked at him curiously. He didn't understand the principle of Lin Youfa's cultivation magic. Lin Youfa seemed to know what he was thinking. He said with a smile, "Why? Are you curious? In fact, it's nothing. Our Immortal Fist sect is an external sect among the cultivation sections. Most of our kung fu is fist and foot kung fu. At the beginning, we are very powerful, but the further we go, the weaker we become. When we encounter cultivators with powerful magic weapons, we basically can't beat them. If you want to know how to cultivate this kung fu, I can tell you." When Li Yundong saw Lin Youfa's eyes flicker as he spoke, he knew that the old man was up to no good. It was very likely that he wanted to use his cultivation method to exchange for Li Yundong's. Li Yundong thought to himself, "Do you think I'm a fool? Do I have nothing better to do than to exchange high-level goods for your low-level goods?" Lin Youfa glanced at Li Yundong and knew what he was thinking. He said, "Generally, everyone has their shortcomings and strengths. Your kung fu is not necessarily the best and most powerful. Although my kung fu is not as good as yours, my cultivation method is not necessarily completely useless. The cultivation way of the world should be inclusive." Although Li Yundong felt that what he said made sense, he still didn't want to answer him. He just said lightly, "I really have no other way. It's up to you whether you believe me or not." Of course, Lin Youfa didn't believe him. He hated him in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face at all. Along the way, he said to himself, "Alas, our Immortal Fist sect has never been successful since it was established in the late Qing dynasty. No matter who sees us, they look down on us and think that we are feudal superstitious. The righteous sects even look down on us and think that we are crooked." As Li Yundong listened to him, he suddenly remembered something. He asked, "By the way, I remember that you said that you were a disciple of Huang Daxian of Kowloon in Hong Kong. How did it become the Immortal Fist sect?" Lin Youfa let out a long sigh. "Don't mention it. If it wasn't like that, how could an outsider like me survive in Nine Dragons? You must know that Hong Kong is the territory of the Great Immortal Sect. If I don't join the Great Immortal Sect and worship Great Immortal Huang, how am I going to settle down? How can we maintain the Immortal Fist sect?" He had seen that Lin Youfa had killed 5 people in a row without batting an eyelid. It was obvious that he was extremely cruel and merciless. He had done this kind of thing many times before, so he had always been highly vigilant in his heart. He would say as little as possible. Along the way, he had been firmly remembering the way he had come and the situation around him. He was afraid that things would change, and he also had a way to deal with it. Watch net. Hongnom Lin Youfa didn't seem to notice Li Yunyan's vigilance. He continued to say, "Alas, my master passed the Immortal Fist school to me. At this time, it has withered so much that I can't even find a few decent disciples. The only one I found seemed to be a good seedling, but he was easily defeated by you." Lin Youfa shook his head, and his white hair kept swaying. "God is making fun of people. Things don't turn out as we wish. I dream of revitalizing our Immortal Fist school, but it's a pity that in the end, it's all in vain. I thought that my cultivation was good, but I didn't expect to meet a few young disciples of a famous sect, and I was at a loss." Lin Youfa let out a long sigh and then fell into a deep silence. He stopped talking and silently led the way. After walking for about half an hour, he suddenly said, "We're here." Li Yunyang was stunned. He stopped and looked around. He saw that he was surrounded by dense jungles. He was on a hillside, about 40 or 50 meters away from the foot of the mountain. There were either wild bushes or tall trees around him. There was nothing unusual at all. "Where is the entrance?" Li Yunyang asked. Lin Youfa chuckled and walked into a dense bush. He pushed aside the thick grass outside and said, "Look." Li Yunyang leaned over to take a look and saw a heavy stone door hidden behind the grass. The color was the same as the grass. Even if the grass was pushed aside, it would be extremely difficult to find. Li Yunyang asked curiously, "How did you find it?" Lin Youfa said proudly, After my forearm was broken by you, I went home to recuperate. When I was recuperating, I heard that the 6 great sects were going to besiege the Fox Zen school, so I was tempted. I found out the news early and came to Tianlong Mountain to inquire about the situation. I went to see the net. 7 KOM. The damn 6 sects regard the Fox Zen school as their own and have almost sealed off the entire mountain. Ordinary people can't detect it and can come and go freely, but once a cultivator enters their field of vision, it's impossible for him to escape their surveillance. So I had no choice but to wander around the back mountain, where the surveillance is relatively loose. As Lin Youfa spoke, he walked to the stone door and pushed it hard. The door was pushed open with a rumble. Then he turned around and waved to Li Yunyang. "Come in." Li Yunyang was bold. He took a deep breath and followed him in. As soon as he entered, Li Yunyang found himself in a tunnel that was as tall as a person and as wide as 3 people. There were obvious traces of artificial excavation in the tunnel. Obviously, it had been dug by someone. There was an extinguished oil lamp on the wall, and the lamp cup was full of oil. Obviously, someone often came here to fill it with oil. Lin Youfa took out a lighter from his pants and lit the oil lamp. Then, he continued, as the saying goes, hard work pays off. One day, I finally found a pair of adulterous couples sneaking around in the back of the mountain. I followed them and found out that they were doing illicit things in this cave. Li Yunyang frowned and asked, "Where are they? Didn't they find you?" Lin Youfa smiled and said, "I found them, but they were doing that kind of thing at that time. How could they have had time to attack me? So I made the first move and killed them." Although Li Yundong was not a soft-hearted person, when he saw that Lin Youfa was talking about these things as if they were family matters, he became more and more vigilant. He said in a low voice, "If you kill them, aren't you afraid that others will find out that they are missing?" Lin Youfa smiled and said, "The Fox Zen school is facing a great enemy and can't even take care of itself. How can they have time to pay attention to these things?" Li Yunyang followed him along the tunnel for about 100 meters and finally came to a wall. He was stunned and said, "There's no way out." Lin Youfa said in a deep voice, "The last time I came here, I turned around and left, but I found that this is actually a door, but it's too heavy. I can't open it by myself, so I need your help to push this wall open." Only then did Li Yunyang understand. No wonder this guy went into the cave and came out again. It turned out that he couldn't open the door. However, although this old man's speed was not very good, his strength was still amazing. Couldn't he open the door? How heavy was this door? Li Yunyang stretched out his hand and tried to push the door, but it didn't move at all. Lin Youfa said, "It's useless. I used all my strength to push it, but I could only move it a little." As he said this, he used qi and became powerful again. He pressed one side of the door with one hand and said, "Come and help me try." Li Yunyang stretched out his hand and pressed it on the same side as him. After taking a deep breath, he shouted and pushed fiercely. He was already very strong, and with Lin Youfa's help, their strength was thousands of kilograms. Even a big truck without wheels could be pushed. However, the door only shook slightly, and a lot of dust fell from it, making the two of them dirty. Lin Youfa swept the dust off his head and cursed in disappointment, F***ck, what kind of broken door is this? It can't be pushed open like this. Are you kidding me? Li Yunyang also raised his head with a serious face and looked around. He said in a low voice, there may be some kind of mechanism. Lin Youfa was delighted and said with a smile, genuinely, you're right. Maybe there is a mechanism. Let's look around. However, the two of them knocked around and touched everywhere, but they couldn't find anything unusual. Lin Youfa scolded loudly, lost. Not to mention the mechanism, there isn't even a damn door. Li Yunyang felt strange in his heart. Since the Fox Zen school has dug such a passage, it is most likely a secret escape route. Then it should be a trap door. But since it is a trap door, why is it closed so tightly? There are no clues of any mechanism around. Could it be that it can only be opened from the inside? As he was thinking, he suddenly found that there was a very small dent pattern on the door. An idea came to his mind. He took the oil lamp on the wall next to him and took a closer look. Then, he swept the stone door with his hand. The dust rustled down, and some shallow grooves appeared on the door. Most of the grooves were rectangular in shape, and strange characters were carved in the rectangular grooves. Lin Youfa, who was standing to one side, came over curiously and sighed. What kind of pattern is this? Hey, there is so much dust. I don't know how long it has been since anyone touched it and how long it has not been opened. During the period of Emperor Xianzong of the Tang dynasty, the Fox Zen school was founded by the Rock Fox, which was a great event in the cultivation world. Unfortunately, the fourth-generation leader, the mystical Silver Fox, was too retrograde and ruined the reputation of the whole Fox Zen school. It made the Fox Zen school hide from place to place and become a street rat in the cultivation world. Tut tut. What a pity. At the end of the Tang dynasty, during the period of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, the world was in chaos and the cultivation world was in flames. The Fox Zen school fished in troubled waters and the mystical Silver Fox was the only one in the world. As he spoke, he kept sweeping the thick dust covering the stone door with his hand, sweeping out the patterns on the whole door. Hearing him talk about the past of the Fox Zen school, Li Yunyang asked, "Do you know the Fox Zen school very well?" Lin Youfa laughed and said, "My master told me when I was very young. I'm not sure, but one thing is certain." Li Yunyang asked, "What is it?" Lin Youfa said, "That is, during the period of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, there was a big fight between Buddhism and Taoism. This was caused by the mystical Silver Fox. Whether it was Su Chan, Zi Yuan, or Wan Hongling, they had all mentioned the mystical Silver Fox more than once. At this time, hearing Lin Youfa mention it, it was obvious that this woman was a great figure in the cultivation world, no matter whether she was right or wrong. He was curious and asked again, "How do you know?" Lin Youfa said casually, "Genuinely, haven't you heard of a saying?" Li Yunyang asked, "What is it?" After Lin Youfa swept all the dust on the stone door, he took a few steps back. While carefully looking at the patterns on the stone door, he clicked his tongue and said, "History is written by the victors. I don't know what happened in the most chaotic and dark period of the 5 dynasties and 10 kingdoms, but I know that the Fox Zen school was a prodigal, so this sect has been discredited everywhere since then, and then it quickly declined. Now, it has finally been found, causing all the major sects in the cultivation world to come and take advantage of it." After he finished speaking, he couldn't help but scold, "Fox Zen school, how do you open this door?" Li Yunyang suddenly said in a deep voice, "I have a way to open this door, /OM/4527894194." Chapter 259. Go to Watch Network. After Li Yundong finished speaking, Lin Yu was overjoyed. "Jinrenli, do you have a way?" Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, "Stay away from me. Go to the Kanban network. 7 KOM. Color ** carat and 1 %% super #fast. Update." Lin Yu looked at him in confusion and stepped back a few meters in doubt. Li Yundong had swept the dust off the stone door earlier and found that the pattern on it was very similar to the size of the leaves of the fan of 7 treasures. Li Yundong even counted carefully and found that there were a total of 49 rectangular grooves on the door, and there were exactly 49 leaves of the fan of 7 treasures. Most importantly, there were clear characters in the grooves. Although Li Yundong couldn't understand them, he felt that they looked like the characters of the Vajra Sutra engraved on the fan of 7 treasures. Li Yundong mobilized his Jinqi to sense the fan of 7 treasures. After a while, the fan of 7 treasures jumped out of the cloth bag by itself. With a swoosh, the fan opened, and then all the fan leaves in the fan bones jumped out and stuck to the stone door one by one. As each fan leaf was stuck, Li Yundong heard a click of the mechanism, and the stone door trembled slightly. Before long, all the fan leaves were embedded in the grooves. Each fan leaf emitted a burst of golden light, and the golden Sanskrit characters on it appeared in the air one by one. It was like a surging stupa wall, shining with golden light and magnificent. The pagoda wall surged for a while and quickly transformed into one Vajra Arhat after another. Then, it quickly disappeared. All the golden light disappeared, and the fan leaves that were embedded in the wall also flew back into the ribs of the fan of 7 treasures psychic fan with a whooshing sound. After all the fan leaves returned to their positions, the fan of 7 treasures automatically closed with a swoosh and landed beside Li Yundong with a thud, motionless like a majestic stone pillar. Lin Yu, who was not far away, was stunned. He looked at Li Yundong's psychic fan of 7 treasures, and his eyes were full of envy and jealousy. For a moment, he was speechless. He stared blankly at the scene in front of him. Just as he was about to ask, he suddenly heard the sound of a mechanism clicking. After a while, with a bang, the stone door suddenly rose up, bringing with it a thick cloud of smoke and dust, quickly drowning the 2 people in the corridor. Ahem, ahem, ahem. Lin Yu covered his nose while driving away the dust around him. He coughed and said, "Jinrenli, is this the fan of 7 treasures?" Li Yunyang also covered his nose. With a wave of his hand, a powerful aura rushed out, dispersing all the smoke and dust around him. He said in a deep voice, "So what?" Lin Yu could hear the strong vigilance and hostility in Li Yundong's voice. He smiled awkwardly and said, "Nothing, I was just asking." Watch need as he said this, he looked at the fan of 7 treasures beside Li Yunyang with reluctance. Li Yundong rewrapped the fan of 7 treasures and carried it on his back. He held an oil lamp in his hand and said, "Let's go." Lin Yu's face was full of eagerness and he said excitedly, "I wonder what will be inside." All his life, he had wanted to revitalize his sect. After coming to the mainland, he found that the kung fu he had been practicing was not superior at all. He was greatly disappointed, so he wanted to fish in troubled waters in the Fox Zen school and gain some benefits to strengthen the power of his sect and improve his own cultivation. At this time, seeing that his wish was about to be fulfilled, even though he was an older cultivator, he couldn't help but be overjoyed and lose his composure. Li Yundong walked in with the oil lamp, keeping a certain distance from Lin Yu along the way. The 2 of them walked along the corridor one after the other. The more they walked, the colder and colder the air around them became. The corridor became wider and wider, and the road became higher and more inclined. After walking for a few hundred meters, Li Yundong found a series of stairs in front of him. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart, did the Fox Zen school hollow out the whole mountain? It's really a huge project. After climbing up about 100 meters, Li Yundong suddenly found that he had come to a spacious stone room. The stone room was about 40 to 50 square meters. The floor was covered with bluestone slabs, and the walls were coated with waterproof paint. There were more than a dozen shelves in the stone room, which were placed on the edge of the wall. Each shelf was more than 2 meters high and formed a circle. There were all kinds of utensils, jade, scrolls, calligraphy, and paintings on them. Li Yundong walked over curiously and picked up one of the scrolls. He opened it and saw that the scroll was yellow. There was an ink painting on it, which depicted several dignified immortals. Lin Yu leaned over to take a look and suddenly said in shock, "Child Endowing Heavenly King Painting. This is Wu Daozi's Child Endowing Heavenly King Painting." It said that the art saint has no authentic works left behind. Could this be true? If it's true, it's worth at least hundreds of millions of yuan. Li Yundong didn't know much about antiques, but he knew that the thing in his hand must be extremely expensive. He hurriedly closed the scroll and put it back on the shelf. When he took things out, he didn't give the shelf any power, but when he put things back, he exerted a certain amount of force on the shelf. Although the force was not great, it was enough to make the rotten wooden shelf, which had been placed for a long time, collapse with a loud bang. One of the rotten wooden legs of the shelf collapsed in an instant. With a squeak, it tilted and fell forward. Li Yundong quickly reached out to hold the wooden shelf, but as soon as he grabbed it, the place where the wooden shelf was turned into a mass of powder in an instant, and the things on it fell down with a crash. Go to see. These things fell on the adjacent wooden shelves and smashed the adjacent wooden shelves. Then, one by one, they fell like dominoes. The wooden shelves fell one by one, and the things on them scattered. The jade fell to the ground and was smashed into pieces. In the blink of an eye, the room was in a mess, as if the Red Guards had passed through. Li Yundong and Lin Yu were both dumbfounded. They looked around in a daze and couldn't say a word for a long time. After a long time, it was not until the last shelf collapsed with a bang that Li Yundong came to his senses. The corners of his eyes twitched a few times, and he thought in his heart, "Oh my God, this is probably the most expensive dominoes in the history of the world." Lin Yu also shouted and rushed to the messy ground to look around. He picked up a piece of jade carving, only to see that it had long been deformed. He opened a scroll, only to see that when the scroll fell, there was a hole in the paper. Lin Yu said to Li Yundong with a wry smile, "Jinrenli, you're really good. Just now, you destroyed at least 1 billion yuan. And it was in US dollars. Li Yundong smiled dryly and said, This is just an accident. You won't ask me to pay for it, will you?" Lin Yu walked around in the room. When he saw a broken antique, he shook his head and sighed. Li Yundong looked at the antique wreckage all over the room and felt his scalp go numb. He didn't want to stay for a second longer, so he said, "Hurry up and leave. If you don't leave, I will." With that, he continued to walk up the corridor with the oil lamp in his hand. Lin Yu sighed and also chased after him. The two of them walked along the corridor for about 10 minutes. Suddenly, there was an open space in front of them, and they came to a large round room. There was no way out of the room. It was empty except for a yin-yang futon in the middle. The walls were covered with characters carved in ancient seal script. These characters had been chiseled into the wall. The handwriting was elegant, and the strokes were strong and powerful. Although Li Yundong didn't know much about calligraphy, he still felt the momentum of the strokes coming from the dragons and snakes. Lin Yu walked into the room and was stunned. There's no way out? How is this possible? Where are the powerful magical weapons and secret books of the Fox Zen school? Where are they hiding? He was shocked and anxious. After lighting up all the oil lamps on the walls of the room, he frantically looked for the exit and the mechanism. However, after looking around, he still didn't find anything unusual. Lin Yu said angrily, "How is this possible? How can there be no way out? It's impossible. There must be another room." The Fox Zen School can't be so shabby. Li Yundong watched Lin Yu wander around the huge stone room like a madman. He said in a low voice, "There's no need to look for anything else. There can't be anything else." Lin Yu turned around abruptly, his face ferocious, and shouted, "Impossible. This news can't be wrong. Otherwise, why would the 6 great sects besiege the Fox Zen School? So many sects want to take advantage of it. The Fox Zen School must have learned that the 6 great sects were besieging them, so they hid these powerful magical weapons. Damn it, it must be so." As he said this, Lin Yu angrily punched the ground, causing it to tremble slightly. Li Yundong glanced at him and shook his head secretly. The only thing he was worried about was that he wouldn't be able to get to the Fox Zen School in time. But after looking around, he really couldn't see any exit, so he turned his attention to the words on the wall and silently recited them in his heart. At first, he couldn't read the words clearly, but after reading them a few times, he found that the words had to be read from right to left and from top to bottom. This was the oldest way of reading. The words were written in large font. "The power of the first turn is like a precious pearl. The mountains, rivers, and universe penetrate the spirit body. The red lotus leaf hides the dantian acupoint, and the red water flows through the pearl of 9 marquises." Li Yundong silently recited the poem in his heart, but he didn't understand the meaning of it. He continued to read and saw that there were notes written in smaller font below. It was written, "The power of Niden begins with 1 and ends with 9. 1 is the birth of all things. Heaven gives birth to water, earth gives birth to fire, heaven gives birth to wood, earth gives birth to metal, and heaven gives birth to earth. The order of the 5 elements originates from 1. Therefore, the power of Niden also originates from 1 and ends with 9. 9 is the extreme of the yang number. When the number reaches 9, the Tao fruit is formed." When Li Yundong saw this, his heart suddenly shook. He unconsciously opened his mouth wide and shouted to himself, "Is this a cultivation book?" Li Yundong hurriedly continued to read, and sure enough, he saw the words below, "The human body is formed by the mating of the father's sperm and the mother's blood. This is the form of intercourse. The origin of Niden is formed by the mating of the heart fire and kidney water. This is the form of intercourse. Therefore, it is said that the form of intercourse leads to life, and the chi of intercourse leads to the formation of Niden." Seeing this, Li Yundong couldn't help but want to slap the table and applaud. Since he had succeeded in the Zhuji phase, he had read a lot of cultivation books, but none of them had explained Niden very clearly. The explanation was either very profound and confusing, or the explanation was very jerky and confusing. But only the sentence in front of him clearly explained what people were and what Niden was. How did people come about? It was very simple. Men and women got it through intercourse. This was the act of mating, so it was called intercourse. And how did Niden come about? It was formed by the mating of the heart fire and kidney water in the chi of the 5 viscera, so it was called the form of intercourse. Lu Dongbin also wrote a poem, "There is heaven and earth in one's own universe, and the heart is better than the heaven and the kidney is better than the earth." It could be seen that the intercourse of the chi of the heart and kidney was the cultivation method of the integration of heaven and earth. As soon as Li Yundong understood this truth, in an instant, it was as if a valve had been opened in his mind. With a bang, all the knowledge was integrated. He felt as if a basin of hot water had been poured down from head to toe, as if he had been enlightened, which made him extremely excited. Li Yundong shouted in his heart, "Which great cultivator wrote this?" He actually explained the words of cultivation so clearly and incisively. Amazing, really amazing. This must be a great cultivator of Taoism. This book must be the supreme treasure of cultivation. Li Yundong's eyes widened with excitement and he continued to look at the words on the wall. He saw that there were large words engraved below, which read, "The second turn of yang forms yin, and the kidney light heart liquid is combined with Dingren. The divine pearl returns to the East Sea like lightning, bursting with spiritual light and purple gold." Then there was an explanation in small font. Li Yundong read all the way to the end. When he saw the 9 turns, it read, "The 9 turns of the carefree Tao fruit is complete, and 3,000 merits are used to become an immortal. The golden book and jade slip declare the imperial edict, and the auspicious clouds cover the 9th heaven." Reading this, the last thing that Li Yundong saw was a line of words written by the engraver. This line of words was written in wild cursive. At first glance, Li Yundong felt an unruly and arrogant aura coming to his face. It read, "In the 15th year of Tang Shizong, Mr. Naiwen Chen Pu created the heavenly Jindan technique. This technique seized the creation of heaven and earth and was an unparalleled secret treasure for cultivation. I yearned for it, but I couldn't get it. However, I spent all my efforts and traveled to the divine land. It took me more than 10 years to record it here in the 3rd year of later Liang Qianhua." After these words were written, Li Yundong finally saw the inscription of the engraver. He saw that the inscription was like a flying dragon and dancing phoenix, and 4 words were written arrogantly, "Mystical silver fox. == tomorrow at midnight. /OM/45278941954. You're tuning into the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.